Welcome to the Thinking Tackle podcast. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now, it is my very great pleasure to be joined by a good friend of mine, and I have to say, although he's too modest to admit it, one of the very best anglers that I know personally. Joe Forrester, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rich.
Now, I obviously know a lot about your fishing over the last, we've known each other for getting on for 15
years.
Yeah, maybe more than 15 years. And it would be probably a little bit more now, but and over that time, your fishing has it's always impressed me. You've done it on limited time. You've had more time in recent years, but I do want to go back a little bit further to start with. And the thing that's always fascinated me with you is how serious you seem to be as an angler from quite an early age. And I want to talk about the time that you spent on the river near your home, which is in sort of Oxfordshire, isn't it?
Yeah. I grew up in Abingdon, which is on the River Thames, so it was a mile bike ride. I used to go every single day.
Really? I mean, you could have taken the easy option, Joe, couldn't you? You could have gone to any number of, Milton Pools or somewhere with lots of carping, but you chose to go to the river.
Yeah, I mean, we did used to go to sort of like linear fisheries and stuff like that, but obviously we didn't have money or anything. My mum would drop us off for a couple of nights every summer holidays or every school holidays, but apart from that, the only place I could go having a bike as transport was a few local lakes that had not much in, or the River Thames.
I mean, that is, and it's serious fishing. You're not going to, as a youngster, you're not going to get a lot of encouragement on the Thames, are you?
Oh no, I was well out of my depth. Didn't ever hardly see a carp, but I didn't just carp fish, I did everything. One week I'd decide to go carp fishing, the next week I'd be pike fishing, then I'd have a feeder rod out bream fishing, perch fishing, pike. Right. It just, whatever I fancied doing at the time.
What you might consider a proper apprenticeship.
Yeah. Did everything, yeah.
You also caught big barbel, because it was around that sort of time that the guy Rob caught his Thames record from that sort of area?
Yeah, no, the barbel were a lot later. I didn't ever try to catch barbel as a kid, but failed miserably. Yeah, they weren't until...
we've got a big one there. We'll come back to that maybe.
Yeah, that was a lot later on, really. Yeah. That was probably 15 years ago now, but yeah.
That's gnarly, isn't it? Is that old gnarly?
It is, yeah. Garth caught it as well, didn't he? Yeah.
That's a real big one. But actually, for instance, there were huge barbel and big carp all through that bit of river that you had access to.
Yeah. The older carp round my way were incredible.
Where do you think they came from?
I think they've been there naturally. Right. I think they've been there since day dot. I've done some research into it and stuff, and if you actually go back, the Thames Valley used to be part of I think it was the Rhone Valley in Germany. This is going back, so carp were indigenous, is that the word? Species to the UK. So the Trent, Thames, the two main rivers that had carp in from early, I think they've always been there and just spawned naturally. And then obviously sort of the later years, sort of the past 30, 40 years, I imagine most of them are flooded in from lakes and what have you.
And I mean, you've done the research, Joe, but I feel like I remember there's some leany fish around the Shillingford sort of area as well. Yeah,
I mean, there is stories of that. There was a couple of small ponds at Shillingford that apparently they used to spawn in every year, and they chucked them in the Thames afterwards. But yeah, I do actually believe they've always been there. Yeah.
So how did you become aware that there were big carp, which is practically on your doorstep in that river?
Saw them.
Did you?
Yeah.
Clear, so the Thames was clear?
Yeah, the Thames was quite clear a lot of the time. Yeah. So, I mean, this is sort of not when I was really young, but when we were 15 and had Polaroid glasses and stuff like that, you'd see them. Yeah. And I didn't catch them. Right. I remember trying to catch a couple, like on bread and things like that when you'd see them. But it always interested me. I've always read everything I could. So, I loved Improve Your Course Fishing magazine. So I think at the time you had Nick Hellier in there. Yeah. And he obviously does all the canals, Thames, stuff like that. And I love that. I always wanted to catch these unknown carp that no one else had caught. So it just interested me, really. And again, didn't have any money for tickets to go anywhere else. So you kind of forced just to fish there. But yeah, it wasn't until later on I probably kind of dropped a bit out of fishing when I was sort of 15, 16 years old, and just went out drinking your mates and stuff like that. And I still love fishing and went, but I didn't take it seriously for a couple of years. It wasn't really till I was 17 till I like I passed my driving test, and suddenly you could drive about, you could do what you wanted, and I actually started to work for Drennan at the same time. So yeah, that's when I started to take it a lot more seriously.
So how did you catch those river carp? Because obviously seeing them was one thing, and presumably these are quite impressive fish, because the fish were big, weren't they, at the time?
Yeah. Bait, like, well, to be honest, I didn't catch them. Most of the time we were blanking. Like, you think now you caught them, but I'd catch a few a year, which is nothing compared to what the sort of... If I knew now what I knew then, I'd have albums full of them. But at the time, pretty naive, really. And
do you think that there were some special fish there then, Joe?
Yeah, oh yeah, there was. Yeah, I see some really, really big fish as a kid. There's a sort of stretch near my house, kind of above where I usually fished. There's a lock, and above that, the stretch there, I see some like colossal fish. Like when I remember we used to see them in the close season. There used to be a little stream that come in underneath this bridge. It's kind of surrounded by reeds and shallow water, and they obviously sort of grouped up there to spawn. They were never there come the start of the season. But I wish I'd just fished for them now. In all honesty, like because they were massive. There was a big ghost carp there. We used to see regularly that. I mean, still to this day, I'd say it was a 40-pound fish. There was another one that used to hang around with it. Grey one, similar size, maybe a couple of pounds smaller. But they were there for years, probably 4 years or so. We used to see those fish come into this stream around that area. And I mean, the one I say was a bit smaller. It might not have been, but the ghosty looked bigger, but he was bright yellow. And I remember another day stood on the same bridge, and I looked down, and there's this big blackfish there, and I'll never forget it. It was absolutely huge. Like, I mean, it might have been 40 pound, but I'll always remember it as being massive. Like, but yeah, they wouldn't have ever been caught, those fish. Probably never have been.
No, and I remember the sort of legacy of those mysterious big uns was still going when I met you. And you were still doing the open of the season for those fish, weren't you?
I did for years, I'd fish the opening night of the season down there, it was horrible. It was about a 3-mile walk, probably. Used to sleep on an hooking mat in a reed bed and get absolutely mullered by mosquitoes.
For nothing?
I did catch them, but not many. You might get one the first night of the season, or sort of, they just vanish. It was just timed wrong. They would have spawned, and they within a couple of weeks of the start of the season, they were gone. And never see them again till the next spring.
They disappeared off into the vastness of the Thames. And
they must have been along that stretch somewhere. But you'd never see them anywhere else.
So, and what made you not concentrate at least one season on the river there, knowing what you'd seen?
Well, I did quite a lot back then, but I'd go everywhere. Like, it was a lot of money to bait it. You catch a lot of bream. It was a long way to walk. I don't know. And you just knew when they were gone. After a few weeks, you'd have done a couple of nights each week fishing for nothing, and they were gone. Like, and I should have fished elsewhere, but I didn't. At that age, you would like, there was fishing lakes I'd seen. There was other bits and pieces. Like, I was going everywhere back then. Like, we'd go floater fishing over lakes in the evening and stalking, and like, you just with your mates going wherever. So yeah, I probably should have done. But
do you think they could still be alive?
I don't think they'd be there, but they could have moved somewhere. Yeah, definitely. Like, the Thames around Oxford changed massively after 2007 floods.
Yes.
They completely vanished. The carp that were there were incredible. They were all old fish, nice fish. They went.
Yeah.
I don't know where they went. I don't know whether they died, flooded into fields or whatever, but they got replaced by
linear fish.
Fish, even higher up from that. I think the linear fish one went even further down. I think a lot of the carp were there. There's some sort of lakes at Bourton on the water, match lakes and stuff like that. And I'm sure the fish we got left with were from them lakes. Like, you're talking 10-pounders with like half a mouth kind of thing. Old ghost carp and stuff. But like, all those old ones, they went. You do hear of the odd one getting caught nowadays. Maybe they're coming back upstream from further down over time, but certainly not where it was.
We've got a few pictures, Joe, haven't we, from early in your river fishing?
Yeah.
And any particular captures that that stand out? Because these weren't, just to clarify, these aren't from the stretch we're talking about.
No,
these are from the town stretch, right?
Yes, yeah. Actually, I think some of them are.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Go on, let's start. So when you did get to grips with the fish from the town, so that one isn't one, is it?
No, that's from much later on. That's probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's go back in time, Tobes. Let's go back. So when Joe had questionable fashion sense and he wasn't. Nowadays, you're like Team North Face. I think back then it was Adidas, Joe, from the
Kickers. Yeah. I had those Kickers jumpers. So I had them in all the different colours and everything. I used to match them with my hat and my.
I mean, look, that's an incredible carp.
Yeah.
So what we've got.
That one was caught a lot earlier. That one was when I was still in school.
Yes.
In fact, I caught that before school.
Yeah. Go on, tell us the story. What was going on?
Well, it's June the 19th I had that, but I'd sort of been baited. I'd seen them. There's in Abingdon Town Centre, there's like a shallow like bit, comes into where the old Upper Reaches Hotel is. Yeah. It's only a couple of foot deep, full of lily pads. And the fish used to obviously get in there again. That's kind of time of year to spawn. And I'd seen them for probably a couple of weeks before the season. And I think I fished June the 16th in the evening. And we'd seen some come in, and I remember baiting it for a couple of days, and I've gone down. I set my alarm early, and I've gone down at 4:00 in the morning before school, and I remember you're fishing like it's 6-8 foot off the water, these walls going down, and I flicked the rods down there, and I remember I was tying up the second rod, and I looked round, and the other one was like it was going, it was straight away, and kind of you had to run along to where I'm stood there and then jump down this wall and come round, and then like you walk down like a slope where these tree roots are and you're in the water. Played him and netted him down there. I think that was £26 at the time.
An ancient looking carp as well.
Yeah.
Not the sort of carp that we see in the river now.
Yeah. I remember there was 2 good ones there that morning, and I'm sure that was the second biggest. There was a bigger one there with it.
One thing that stands out to me about that story, I would say that the one thing that always impresses me about what you do is how driven you are and how much you're willing to put yourself out. Yeah. You think nothing of getting up at 4:00. In fact, you do it quite a lot, don't you? But the thing is, you've done it at school age. So why, Joe? How old are you there? Like 16 or something?
Probably 15. Was the last year at school. Yeah.
So why at that age were you getting out of bed at 4 when most of your schoolmates wouldn't be getting up till, I
don't know. I didn't do it a lot at that age. It was just then. I'd seen them and I wanted to go and catch them, and you probably didn't want to wait till the weekend because they might not be there by then. Yeah. So it was the only chance I had.
Yeah. I think, you grew up with quite a lot of lads around you that fished, but to me it always seems like you were more serious than any of them.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And it's continued like that. You've never stopped, Joe, have you? Really?
No.
I don't think.
No. Anyway. Sort of 2 years. I've got 2 children now, and both years they were sort of born 2013 and 2015. I fished local and only fished sort of one night a week when they were 3-4 months old. I started again and just did one night a week.
You definitely fished 2 weeks after, I think. Was it when Molly was born?
I didn't. No, Molly was born February 18th. The first trip I did was 6 weeks late. Maybe it wasn't 6 weeks.
But anyway,
it was the end of March. Yes. It was the end of March, 28th of March or something.
I think maybe that what it illustrates though is that there's something that drives you to go fishing. Yeah. I mean, it feels like maybe you were a bit more like feral as a kid, like you were.
Oh yeah. I still am now. I think. Yeah.
But what is it, Joe, that makes you go, do you think, and that gets you up at 4 a.m?
I don't know, to be honest. I absolutely love fishing and going, but if I'm going, I want to catch them. Yeah. And to give myself the chance to catch them, that's what you kind of got to do. I
mean, you've developed a style that I would say is very much your own, a way of catching them that works for you. Yeah. And I think we're going to talk about that in a bit, because it's really important to establish the sort of things that make you successful. Yeah. You can do it all, you can stalk them, you can float a fish from, but the way that you like to do things is to put in the groundwork, put in the effort, and bait them, don't you? Yeah. That's sort of the way that your angling has evolved. And actually, when I first met you, you were working at Drennan, and you were doing a couple of nights a week,
Yeah.
overnighters. And I think at the time, it almost felt like you had to put more effort in because we're going to talk a little bit about the way your life has changed later, but you now have more time, don't you?
I still do the same sort of thing 2 nights a week most of the time. Yeah.
But it always felt like you were, to me anyway, and I know we spoke about this the other day, and perhaps I'm wrong, but it felt like you were more dangerous when you were pushed for time. You were willing to put in more effort than anybody else to make it happen.
Well, if you want to catch them, you've got to put in more than everyone else. The second you stop doing that, then the other person's going to catch more fish than you. I'm quite competitive, I suppose, in a way. Like, I want to catch them, so I put in the effort to catch them.
And the sort of fishing that you want to do, Joe, let's talk a bit about that, because obviously that grounding on the Thames, let's say, fishing for carp that may or may not ever have been caught, have flooded in, have lived peaceful lives, whatever it is, they're largely unknown, is the sort of thing that you've tried to replicate throughout your fishing, isn't it? More or less.
Yeah. I've never been particularly interested to go and fish circuit waters.
Yeah.
I know I kind of probably will have to now, because the kind of fishing I like to do completely dried up, and I think it'll be gone in another 10 years. So you got to fish higher stock lakes with fences, syndicates and such. But everyone's kind of like goes and catches these fish, but I don't know, they're fish that everyone's caught.
You don't want to tread the same path as your mates.
I'm not saying they're easy to catch, but they come out regularly. In fact, they're probably harder because you're competing with people to catch them. That's one thing I have learned. I always used to look at these fish and think, God, he's at it. It's easy to catch. But then if you actually go and try and do it, it's not, because you're competing against so many anglers trying to do it. It's not just you against the fish or a couple of mates. It feels like you've got to be there on a Wednesday and stay till Sunday to catch them carp.
Which has never been your fishing, has it?
No.
Spell it out for us, mate. What's your ideal scenario then? What is this scenario that's disappearing in your eyes?
Just sort of low stock lake, like almost I say natural, but fish that have come, they've been probably illegally moved at some stage and put into these lakes and stuff. In a low stock lake of say 10, 15, 20 carp maximum. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore, does it? But those lakes, back when I started carp fishing, they were everywhere.
Yes.
There was so many of them across Oxfordshire. You could fish for the rest of your life without even going anywhere else. But now there is nothing.
What do you think has been the change? Like, obviously, the otter situation, we've had it pretty bad in Oxfordshire. And what it does do is puts the doubt in your mind about those low stock lakes that are in the middle of nowhere, let's say.
Well, obviously, we had the 2007 floods, which ruined quite a lot of lakes. Took away a lot of fish. Then we've had the otters since. They've sort of eaten a lot of the good carp. So you go to a lake and I'm not talking big carp, I'd be interested in fishing for £30 fish. But they're not really even there now. A lot of them, they've gone. And again, a lot of lakes now are brought with the intention of turning them into a syndicate. And they don't stock 5 carp in there or 10 carp. They put 120 carp in there. That they all look the same. You've got people wanting to fish, and it's completely different. Like,
we'd all do it, wouldn't we, Joe? I think the thing is, we talked about it on the way over. You get a lake, and you want it to be kind of like the carp angler's dream, which isn't often 5 fish for most people, is it?
No,
I think you have to accept that your perfect scenario is far from what most anglers want to do, isn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to fish a lake with say 100 carp in, and they're all nice big old carp. That'd be good as well, but they're not, are they yet? No, we've just been on that. It feels like in the last 10 years we've been on that sort of a period of real flux in fishing, where one era has come to a close and the next era is in full swing, and there's been a bit in between. Like you'd argue that you're at the era of the proliferation of simmos. Was that middle portion? Quite a lot of those fish are old now.
They are. They'll be quite sought after, I think, in a couple of years' time.
Maybe
the last of the simmos.
Absolutely. I was at Horton recently, and you think of that as a lake full of simmos, but actually it's really not now. I think they're less than 50%. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, there's a few big ones, but the majority of them are either dead or there's only less than half the stock now is those fish. So things change, but before we want to move, I think probably a good place to really illustrate what it is that you love with fishing is a lake that one of the few lakes you have fished with that people would really know, have heard about, is the Dorchester Lake.
Yeah, it's been spoken about a bit now.
It has now,
yeah.
isn't it? It's a bit more out there. I mean, we wouldn't have done this 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago, because it was very much on the it was fairly well kept secret.
Yeah,
a few lads,
we wanted to keep it between ourselves,
of course.
We? So, yeah.
And it was the sort of the Birmingham lads. Obviously, your friendship with Tom Stokes was started there. That really were the first to kind of come in and stick it.
Yeah,
but to paint us a picture of Dorchester, and it was a lake that I think, when I think of Dorch, there's only a couple of lads' albums that you'd really want. Yours is one, and our mate Mitch is another.
Yeah.
Like you walked the walk there, Joe, didn't you?
Yeah, I've known Dorchester for quite a long time. I had an Alliance ticket which covered a lot of the bits of river round by me as a kid.
Yeah.
So I had fished it as a child, like in I say carp fishing. I had sort of tutti frutti boilies on. I was quite happy to catch a few tension a day. Didn't actually ever think I would catch a carp. But yeah, I spoke to people down there at the time because I was probably a punisher. I used to go around and talk to them and stuff. And I heard about these carp in there, and this guy was telling me that someone had fished it for a whole year and caught one 14-pound common, and sort of little stories like that.
Yeah.
Years later, again, when I first started driving, I've become really good friends with a group of lads that lived in the Berensfield, just sort of round the corner. We all had our cars and stuff, and so we used to go over there a lot, and we'd sit in the car park and play football in the field next to it and things. And I remember like, I'm going to have a go on here. And I remember baiting up the sort of the end of the point with buckets and buckets of maize. And I ended up doing a couple of nights out there. And I actually lost one.
Right.
I remember it just went down this channel, and it ended up cutting my line off, down there.
Yeah.
God knows what it was. It felt like quite a good fish at the time, but they probably all were, most of them. And again, probably gone elsewhere, done little bits. I mean, I was 17 at the time, so I'd go elsewhere. And again, I did the same thing probably about another a few years later. By this time, my mate Pete and Ginge were fishing it quite a lot. So I speak to them all the time, and they tell me bits about it. And I remember having another little go round the other side of the reef to where I'd lost this fish. And I remember doing the same baiting out for a couple of weeks, and I actually had another bite that first morning, and that cut me off as well. It was like, you don't get cut off.
No, it's a gnarly little pit though, isn't it? All kinds of stuff in that lake.
Yeah. It was just weird how they both these fish had cut me off on my first night, and then I'd done a couple more nights, both times, and never had anything, and then kind of carried on with what I was doing before. And it wasn't until 2009 that I fished it properly. I'd actually got a ticket for another lake in Oxford, like the Leany Lake.
Yeah.
And I'd done a few trips there. It was going really well. And then, unfortunately, the big fish in there died. And kind of there weren't much else in there, really. I'd caught the second biggest one, and this old one had gone. I think I went fishing with my brother for a night on another lake local. And we kind of, where am I going to go? And I just thought, I'm going to go to Dorchester. And I think I went that night and fished. I remember I fished in the tyre swim. And my mate Ginge he used to live in the crate swim, which was kind of behind me. And I remember chatting to him and everything that night. And that was the year I got married. So it was 2009. And I couldn't fish for a couple. I didn't fish much that spring. But I remember I had a stag do. My stag do, I went to Ibiza for a week, and my missus was going away on holiday for 2 weeks, so it kind of covered the week. And then when I was back, I had a week free when she wasn't there, so I could technically fish every night if I wanted to between work. And anyway, I'd fished this tyre swim this night with Ginge, and I'd found this lovely spot out there, and I thought, I'm going to fill that in.
What was it, sort of like clean silt, that sort of thing?
No, it's gravel, yeah. It was, I don't know, it seemed away at the time, but it's probably 30 yards.
And this is the biggest area of open water on the lake that you're talking about,
out in the middle of the lake. And to get to this reef where this swim was, there used to be wooden bridges connecting it all, but they had long gone and rotted away, so you used to have to wade out there. So you didn't get that many people going out there.
Whereas conversely, the far side, the high bank swim, is where all the cars would, like a lot of the lazy anglers would fish.
Yeah, no, it's all pleasure anglers would, yeah. But they never got carpfish those swims, ever. No one wanted to fish there because the cars would drive up and down behind you all night. But anyway, going back, I found this spot off the reef, and I remember I'd used a bit of bait before, but never anything like this. And this is kind of like almost the start of how I began to fish.
Yes.
I remember I put out, and I'm sure it was something like 87 kilo bait. I put out on this spot.
That's particle, wasn't it, mate? A lot of that.
Mainly. I think there's probably 5-10 kilo of boilie there, and then I've got a picture of it at home, but it's like stacks of these buckets of bait that I had in my house in Didcot all ready to go in. I think it's the night before I went to Ibiza for this stag do. I've gone down, and I've gone out there, cast and mark, float out, pumped the dinghy up, paddled out there, and just levered it in. Just filled this spot in. I've gone away for a week, come back, and it's the first night I fished, and I got back. I had to take it like 3 o'clock in the morning, and caught floppy tail.
Now, what the anticipation levels must have been pretty high, Joe. Despite the fact you're probably a bit hungover.
Yeah. I actually, I tell you what, I didn't fish the first.
And you're also sporting a black eye.
I did have a black eye. Yeah. I actually didn't fish the first night I got back. I remember I went down, I put 5k boilie, just straight 18 millers out on the spot. Yeah. And then I think I'll come back after Monday after work and fish the night. And had that one.
Talk to us about floppy. This was quite a hard. I never caught that fish, but if I didn't catch most of them, but the quite a hard fighter, wasn't it? This one renowned for
did.
rocking.
He went. I remember he really pulled. And the whole swim was covered in lily pads in front, and I remember it was in there, and I turned on the light. And actually, when I had been down there before, I'd had that fish feeding in the edge in a swim called the Blair Witch Corner. Yeah. I remember it was coming through. At the time, I didn't know what fish it was. That fish actually looked bigger in the water than what it was. Because I remember speaking to Pedro and Gin's like, I've got this big grey mirror feeding in the edge. It's £35 plus. Yeah. Looks. And anyway, as soon as I remember flicking the head torch on a net, and it was like, that's that one I was feeding the other week. And it was him, and he was 33.10, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, lovely character, in many ways, completely atypical to the Dorch stock. The rest weren't really like that, were they?
No, he's a bit different, isn't he? Yeah. I don't know whether they're from different places or never know, will we? But
on for those guys listening, we're talking about would you say it's relatively short fish, Joe? That one?
Probably. He looks quite long in the pictures. Yeah, they sometimes do, don't they? A lot of the fish in Dorchester.
Slopey head, like buttery yellow at the bottom of the flanks. 3 big plates on the middle of the flank there. Big fins, a fish that was to meet a really sorry end, wasn't it?
It's a horrible story, isn't it? Yeah. But it's quite fitting of him, really. That
he battled through.
Yeah, he got eaten pretty much alive by otters, dragged up on an island, and a few of the local guys, Dan and Ross, found him on an island, and they actually treated him up with sort of iodine and everything like that. This fish was dry, gasping on the bank.
With a big hole in the side.
Yeah, and it's obviously been there for hours. And they put it back, and it somehow healed up, survived, and still got caught a couple more times.
And then got ottered again.
Yeah, and then unfortunately got ottered again.
And the lake is now fenced. I think Embryo fenced it, actually. I remember walking around there with Dan. It was one of the very first, I think it was one of the first places they did. But so you're underway with floppy. The baitings worked, Joe, straight away.
Yeah, it did. I didn't get another bite off that spot, though.
What?
No,
never?
No. I didn't fish it that much, to be honest. I fished it that week pretty much every night, I think. I think at the end of the week, Ginge caught cuttail from the car park.
Right.
So he caught that fish then. And then I don't think I fished again. I did all the nights that week. And then, because I was getting married mid-June, I think I just knocked it on the head for 6 weeks. So I didn't fish for a few weeks before, and a few weeks after. I actually went to Mexico on honeymoon and stuff. And so I didn't go back until probably, I think it was mid-July.
One of the things that I would say about you, and it's one thing that is always clear, is when to press the button. You know when to put when it's on. You pull the stops out generally. Haven't you? That's when you don't let your focus slip.
No.
But on this occasion, had you done enough nights after that capture to think, do you know what, this has slipped away, this chance, and therefore I don't need to push.
I hadn't seen anything on this. It was just one of them. I found it, filled it in, caught one, and they didn't come back.
We should also point out that this was a lake that wasn't really fished. Like you put paddling out and filling in with 80 key isn't going to disturb anyone's fishing. No,
there would have been no one there. It would have been a weeknight, and you'd be lucky if there's one angler around it. Really,
little club lake. So what would you say? Is it like? I mean, how big
it'd actually been busier that year than it probably ever had been. I think like that spring there was Jamie Cook, who works for the Angling Trust. I think Pedro, my mate, Ginge, Dave Elliott was having a go. So it'd probably seen more attention that year than it ever had done. I think a guy had caught the big ling
out the corner.
The autumn before, and put it all over the cart for him. With that floppy tail, actually, it was.
I remember him.
So word was starting to get out there. These fish were in there, and I think that the spring was busy. Anyway, I baited it, fished at that time, didn't come back to the middle of July, by which time it was a completely different lake. The weed had come to the top, and there wasn't anyone fishing it.
Could be an absolute football pitch of a lake.
Yeah, It looked like you could walk across, but it wasn't actually that thick, 'cause it'd choke itself.
Yes.
It'd blanket all across the top, but underneath was actually quite clean. Like horrible and black and smelly.
Very, it feels like a really old lake, Joe, doesn't it? Like the silt deposits are thick and stinky. There's bits of woodwork everywhere, crumbling old platforms. A mega, a carp angler's dream, isn't it?
Oh, really? It is, yeah. One of the best lakes I've ever fished.
So did you then flip round to fishing the high bank, or were you going to? How did it unfold after that?
I think when I went back in July, there's sort of series of little islands along the back. Scaffold Point. So you got sort of there, but then if you get out to, it's called Scaffold. Scaffold Point. And then you go left, don't you? And you got the little dot islands that go along all the way down to like Blair Witch.
Throw us a picture up, Tobes, because obviously this is well and truly on the map now. So if you go to Dorchester on Thames, we'll guide you in. But carry on, Joe.
So there's a little series of islands going along there. And I was seeing them in front of them, a couple of them. I've actually fished a couple of them for sort of periods through the summer, just sleeping out there.
Baiting?
Yeah, I was. Not massively.
The thing is, you're always baiting something, Joe, aren't you? That's worth. Even if it's not big hits, you're consistent.
There's always something going in somewhere,
even if it's not where you're fishing at the time.
But I was seeing these fish come into this island for a little period, into these little islands and the channels around it for a little period. And so I was baiting there. Not a lot of bait, just sort of half a bucket, like a bit of seed, few boilies, stuff like that through the summer. And I didn't do great. Like I remember they always fed on it when I weren't there. But when I fished, I'd get absolutely smashed by swans. Remember getting liners all one night and getting done and not catching them. But you used to watch them coming off this island. To be honest, they probably knew you were there a bit as well.
These islands are tiny. We should point out they're like half the size of this room. Probably this bit we're in now, isn't it?
I'm sure one of them weren't much bigger than this table. And I used to lay on it with my rods.
You aren't bed chair. You're not using a chair.
No, you couldn't fit one on there. So, and then the rods were sort of sat back next to you.
Let's show it. Sorry, Tobes. I mean on the map, mate.
Oh, sorry, you want a Google Maps?
Dorchester on Thames, Google Maps.
So probably every time I move, I'm letting them know I'm there.
What are you fishing right under the tips?
It's really close.
Because these islands sort of like guarded the entrance to the bit that was their home, really.
That was back snags,
where you couldn't fish, but they lived. So when they came out, they had to access through these channels, and you're fishing the channels. How quick did you caught halfling out there? Was that?
Yeah, I had the halfling off one of them little islands, and I caught that. It was absolutely torrential rain.
Right.
So it was.
Did you get a brolly up?
No. So I just laid on my sleeping bag, and I probably caught it because I was quiet that day because I just literally pulled the sleeping bag over my head and just laid there
in the rain.
Yeah. And it chucked it down anyway. It ripped off like in the morning, and it was one fish called halfling.
Yeah, he's a mega one. I mean that got chuck that one up, Tobes, while we're The halfling was one of the fish that could have still been around, wasn't it, for a while? I don't know if it eventually died.
There was rumours, weren't there, the last couple of years that he was still there, but I don't think he was.
That's his linear side, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was a halfling on the other side.
They all had these really distinctive, deep-set linear scales, didn't they, those fish?
Yeah, they were almost sunken into the body, weren't they?
Yeah. I think the only way, I'd always liken them to if you've seen the picture of Chris Yates with the bishop, like the way that the scales sort of flare at the ends
Yeah.
and stuff.
I've always thought the big one.
Yes,
is very Bishop-like. Yeah.
Well, even this one's very similar.
Yeah.
Little fins, Joe, isn't it? Little rounded fins, little snubby head on him. That one.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, like quite big eyes.
Yes, got boggly eyes. You got the other side as well. For that one,
I don't think I
didn't put it in. You didn't put the half side in. That's cool.
Sure.
Yeah. Did you do that? The pictures on the island, or were you pulling them off?
No, there was another kind of. It was an island as well, actually, but sort of between me and Scaffold Point.
Maybe the right area there somewhere.
I think my mate Garth's come down in the morning and we just walked.
Yeah,
I walked.
So can you see that the playground in the middle there? It's that lake. There's a lake just above it. That one. Yeah, come right in, mate. You won't be able to see a lot. So if you take the cursor up, Tobes, towards the road.
Yeah, let me just show it. So up here,
there. So down a bit. That sort of back. So there, you can't see it amongst the trees, but that's actually a
little series of islands.
Yes. So where your cursor is now is probably where you caught it, Joe, isn't it? Around that sort of neck of the woods.
Just the other side on that.
On the right hand side.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There.
Yeah, kind of a bit further along there. Yeah.
So a little chain of islands which are in front of I mean, that the water from that in those back bays goes all the way left through those trees.
In fact, that whole bank there that you can see running along the motorway is actually all little islands back to the road, isn't it? And sort of
so you don't get lakes like that anymore, do you? You know, like in terms of the way it's dug.
Yeah.
See what you mean? You wouldn't want to fish up there, would you?
No.
Is that busy road there?
It is.
Mate,
busy road. Busy road and. Very, very tight. There are no swims along that bit anyway, are there? So, but the half the thing to note about these fish is that I don't believe there's been a stock like this in the UK. Like, not that we're as distinctive as the Dorch fish.
No.
Well, that's not true. There must have been, but for us in the Oxfordshire, they were right at the top.
Yeah. It was almost like an Oxfordshire car park lake, but the carp were £15 smaller.
Yeah,
it didn't matter.
It kind of illustrates what you were saying, like before about the size. Not in a sense it doesn't matter.
No, every single one of them was amazing.
The halfling on its own, mega.
Yeah, well, the halfling, without being horrible to the halfling, was probably the worst one there.
Yeah,
but it's still, you put that in any other lake, it'd
be the beautiful one.
Yeah, it'd be the best one. Yeah.
The old playing fields down here, Joe, where you would be having a kick around as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we stand there, me, Sean, Pete, Charlie, Denzel. Quite a lot of us used to sit there and play football, tennis. Like the girls would come with us, and we'd stand in those tennis courts and play it for hours every evening.
I mean, you could on Dorch get the sense, and I think Stokesy said it in a thing we did for SIP, that it was slightly rough around the edges. Like, but you were a local boy, so it doesn't.
No, I don't think it was rough. I'm sure it's much rougher up by Tom and than it is there. Like, it's quite nice. It's probably one of the poshest villages.
I think if you're an outsider,
because it wasn't fenced or like a fishery, you used to get. There was a lot of boy racers that used to come up and down them tracks around the lake.
Yeah,
and that sort of high bank area, especially, like there's a McDonald's down the road. So they'd all pull up and they'd all be sat there having a splare for beer, like throwing all their rubbish out the windows, pumping tunes. But I don't think any of them would have ever said anything to you.
No, it's nothing. But do you know what? I do have a story from, I don't know if it was before I met you, I think. I'd started work. I'd just moved to Oxford, started work down the road from there. Yeah. And one of the lads, Dan, had caught, who worked there, had caught one of the, I don't know which one it was, to be fair.
Yeah.
He'd caught one from Blair Witch Corner, £30. And he was fishing there, and I think I'd gone there. Maybe me and Stu maybe had gone there to see him or to have a walk round, and there was this mate hanging around there, and turns out he'd flashed Dan.
Yeah, there was actually, that was still going on when I fished it. There was a guy, he used to flash people and stuff. I never saw him myself.
I had to go and give a statement to the police because I think Dan reported him.
Yeah.
And I was about, and I'd seen the matey around. He's hanging around that bus stop corner sort of thing, and he used to be able to access it from the road.
I don't know who he was. I'm sure he lived in Berensfield local, and he used to ride around on a little bike. I've seen him, but never see him flash. But people say, that's a flasher. That's a flasher.
Right.
He's just a weird little man that used to cycle around there on his bike.
So I don't think things got weirder than that anyway. No. But that was that was Blair Witch Corner. Why was it called Blair Witch Corner? Do you remember?
I'm sure, like when there's a guy called Glenn that used to fish it with Ginge and Pete Pedro and stuff back in the day.
He went on to catch them from everywhere, didn't he?
He
The
did,
chef.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
he a chef? Yeah.
He was a chef, yeah. Or worked in catering or something like that, yeah. But I'm sure, I don't know, they've gone in there one night and there was, I've never watched the Blair Witch film, but I'm sure there's some like triangles of sticks or something like that. Or stones laid out on the floor, and someone had done that in there.
Some kind of occult.
Yeah. It probably wasn't. It's probably some little kid that just sat there and did it, but they called it
Blair Witch.
Blair Witch for that, yeah.
So you've caught the half then. Did you persist on the islands?
I did for a little while, yeah. I didn't get another bite from there.
But it was kind of a relief, Joe, in the end, to be able to actually put a bed chair up somewhere.
Yeah. I can't remember where I fished. I probably dotted around a little bit, but I remember at this time I'd started fishing, started baiting. It would have been probably, I reckon I caught that carp probably early August. And by mid-August, I was baiting a swim called the High Bank, which is where everyone sits.
Yes.
No one fishes it.
Yeah.
Because who would want to sit there with guys sat in cars behind you? But I don't know, to me, it was the centre of the lake. And I'm sure it was Glenn, the guy that fished it previously, had caught the big len off there years before, like 5-6 years before, off that swim. But since then, it hadn't really got fished. People would fish the open water, but they'd fish it from
the gate and stuff.
Yeah, what they call it, Bummers Point, like the gate, tyre swim. No one had fished over there. But I just thought it was ideal, really. It's choked with weed out in the main body of water. I could park behind the swim, which I know sounds lazy. I don't really care if I had to do 5 laps to get to where I was, but it was just convenient.
Especially with dinghying.
Baiting. Yeah, I could literally plug my boat into my cigarette lighter on my van, sit there, roll a fag, and the boat would blow up.
Yeah.
And then I'd just paddle out to this marker. In fact, I did it in dark sometimes, and I'd put the full beams on my old, I don't have an Astra van there. I used to park at the top, put the full beams on so I could see the marker float sat in the middle of the lake, and I'd just row out there and bait round it.
You're committed to the big baiting approach by now, aren't you?
Yeah, I thought that was the way to go. The thing with Dorchester, though it was quite a low stock of carp, there was a hell of a lot of fish in there. The tench were horrendous. There was bream. There was a lot of roach and stuff as well. There was a lot of competition. If you just, I don't know, it's almost if you fed like a kilo of bait, that would be gone before it even got dark with tench. And
you chose a similar sort of area, I guess. How far away from the spot you fished in the reef was your spot you chose out of the High Bank?
I don't know, it seemed quite a long way, but it probably wasn't. It was probably like
10 yards off the back of it, isn't it?
Probably 30-yard gap between the two spots, probably.
Okay, so which is that? Yeah.
I don't know, what was it, 100 yards across?
Right. So one of the things that interests me about what you've done here is that you know that they live in the snags near the islands where you've caught one.
Yeah. That would dwindle a bit in the summer because the water levels would drop, so they would
force them out.
Yeah, they would stop going, and obviously there's weed in the lake, so they don't need to force themselves.
But you were happy that they were going to visit that middle,
yeah,
that sort of biggest area of open water. Yeah. So what was your mix like? What were you putting out there, Joe?
To start with, I was putting a lot of particle. I think mainly to start with nuts, sort of everything.
Hemp and tigers, like at the base of it.
Yeah. Probably not that many tigers back then. I started using more in recent years, but. Yeah, a lot of it would have been hemp seed mixed with the pigeon conditioner, the aniseed one.
Yeah.
Anything, pellet, probably put corn, a bit of maize, just kind of that sort of cheap stuff out there. The idea was just to create this great big area out in the middle. And so it was probably about 40 yards out from the bank, but it was solid weed. It was just weed laid. You would never have landed a fish. Your lines would have been laying across.
Yeah.
Ducks would have been walking across them. You couldn't fish it, but I baited it, and obviously I could cast a marker float out there and just whip it along the top of the weed on the way back. And I slowly started chipping away I used a castable weed rake.
Yeah.
And in years gone by, we've come up with some really good ways of doing it. Like we made these massive great rakes on 100 metres of rope that we'd take out, bring back to the bank. And I wish I'd just done that, but at the time I was using a castable rake on the braid, and I just used to chip away with it. Every time I went and baited up, I'd bring a bit more in. And by the time I get around sort of fishing it in sort of September time, I had a perfect channel, just going straight out to this spot in the middle of the lake.
So you've almost sacrificed the whole summer, Joe. But obviously, you've had things going on.
Yeah, I
but
would have been doing
you're
odd
willing
nights
to bait.
around and stuff.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Other lakes. Or on
No, I
Dorch.
think it was just on there.
Bobbing
Yeah, I
around
didn't
on
go
Dorch.
anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, but you, in your mind, you've got a plan, and,
Yeah.
and it's starting to, you're planning well in advance of being able to fish it, then, aren't you? Really?
Yeah.
So when you came to fish it, again, anticipation must have been high that what you'd been doing was going to bear fruit quickly. Had you seen stuff out there, Joe?
No, not carp, but it was always fizzing out there and stuff. I caught a big roach.
Did you?
Yeah. It's probably the biggest roach I've ever caught still to this day. I didn't weigh it because it was on a size 4 hook through the top lip. It was on a Brazil nut.
Right.
Remember I had a beep. It's probably on there hours, and then I've wound in a few hours later to go to work, and there's this great big roach on the end. But
And that's when you started fishing the open water spot?
yes, yeah.
Was this before you started? For a long time, you used the D-rigs, didn't you? The Amnesia D-rigs?
Yeah.
Was this pre that? Or
no,
you started to
I
use it?
caught floppy tail on one.
Did you?
Yeah. I've been using them on there. I think the thing with that D-rig is I've never found it to be that great with big baits.
Right.
Because it's so tight to the back of the shank. I think if you're using obviously the tension are an issue, so I was using 22mm hook baits.
Yeah.
I remember rolling 20mm cork balls up and stuff. But where that hook's tight to the bait, almost in my eyes, that bait can go in and the hook's shielded, if you know what I mean. Because if it was a 10mm, the hook's the biggest
using a
thing.
6 or something?
No, it would have been a 4.
Or 4.
Yeah. So I was actually using sort of just coated braid rigs with quite a nice hair on them, so there's separation.
Okay.
So the hook could hang freely and catch.
They're anti-tent rigs. Long hairs,
yeah.
big baits.
Yes, that was it. Yeah.
And did it work for that? Did it? I mean, you presume still caught tench.
I remember I think I did like 2 nights. I did a weekend there once. I didn't do many weekends, but I did for this 1 week for some reason. And I remember I thought, right, I was using loads of peanuts as well.
Yeah.
A lot of peanuts. Anyway, so this I've done this weekend would have been the first 2 nights done on this spot. And I remember I took loads of bait and I filled it in. I was thinking I was spomming all weekend. It was like going to Brasenose or something.
Yeah.
You're filling it in, catching tench. I think I caught a big bream and everything. And I was using these little leads. And I was tying them on because we used to tie them onto a ring rather than, we didn't have heli safes back then. So they'd come off and I'd get these fish through the weed. And I ran out of leads. And it was the last morning. And I ended up just tying it on because I thought I wouldn't be able to fish with that anymore. I think it was about 11 o'clock. The rod absolutely melted. And it's quite shallow, Dorchester, but on top of this bar out in the middle, it's probably 4 or 5 foot of water. And I remember the rod went, and the bow wave went that way, and bow waves went everywhere. They were just didn't know which one I was attached to. They just carried on going. And it just weeded me up solid. Took line through weed beds, and I couldn't move. I ended up going out in the dinghy, and I just got my rig back. It had gone. So from then on, I was fishing it. And I remember that was on. I think it's on a stack of peanuts with a grain of plastic maize on it. That would have been on a D rig.
Yep.
And then, obviously, I've started using bigger and bigger baits to avoid catching these tensions.
Switch to the coated braids. Yeah.
And once I was using the 22mm, I didn't catch a tench for quite a while.
Pretty selective.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Now, it would have been around that time. I think I'd been out in Oxford or something with the missus, and we came over to see you with one.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the first one you had, the scatty, which
no,
I think
it wasn't. No.
But we'll come to that. But I honestly believe that was one of the most unique carp I've ever seen in the flesh. Just a phenomenal fish. But had you pressed the button at this point? Had you gone full Joe Forrester and been like, no, I'm doing because bear in mind you're still at Drennan then, so you have to do overnighters all weekends.
I used to, and I still would today. I'd fish 2 nights a week. I used to fish one Tuesday. I'd pick which one looked better weather-wise or whatever. It wasn't much. So Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday I'd fish. And then I'd fish a Friday night.
Yeah.
And
to stay a bit longer in the morning.
Yeah, because on the Friday I could stay till 11 o'clock in the morning if I wanted to, and I'd still be home at lunch to see the missus. So you ride out bite time.
Yeah.
Well, as those overnighters had to be at work for 9 o'clock. you kind of miss it a lot. You'd be winding at 8 o'clock to get to work on time.
Yes.
I'd still fish that way now if I could, but now my boy has football on a Saturday morning, and often if we play away and stuff like that,
It's an early start.
it's earlier start than work to get there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I could string up more time in the week.
So once you'd sort of resolved that this was the start of your little campaign in the high bank, what happened?
I carried on baiting it, and at this point I cut back on the seed. And I remember I was using great big buckets of peanuts, probably more than most people would use. But I used to put a lot of salt in with them. They were so salty. I remember I had really cut hands at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember going out there and it was like stinging your hands putting them in. And a lot of boilie, big boilie, all 18s, 22 millers, and more of it. And like I was regularly going out putting 5 kilos, and probably what weighed 15, 20 kilo of peanut out there as well. Yeah.
So I mean, that's costing you money at the time.
Yeah. I was paying.
It still does. But,
I was paying for it all. Yeah.
That's a lot. But I mean, it just shows that your commitment to that way of fishing, Joe, is you're willing to spend the money to do it.
Well, I've always thought I didn't drink. I didn't go out a lot. Of, if you go out for a night out, it's £100 odd. I didn't do that, so I could spend that on bait instead, which I think is the biggest edge. Yeah.
Big investment, but big return.
Yeah.
What was the next one you had off there?
The first one I landed off there was the scarred common.
Right.
And that would have been, I think that was the following week after. This all happened in quite a quick period. So the week after I lost that fish, I had that one.
So there it is. Like, always struck me that the tail and tail wrist was so distinctive to that lake as well. Like the big one.
Yeah.
Was like that, wasn't it?
One. Yeah. It's funny. He had on that side there, he's got quite a pale face.
Yeah.
When you turn him around, the other side of his head was really dark. I don't know why. I've always just noticed it with him.
Yeah, big leathery patch on the flank, like a big disturbance of scales.
Again, he was a £32, so like
good big fish.
Big fish. Still big fish now. Like.
Yes, absolutely. So you had that. What was the situation surrounding that one? You've got there. Was this an overnight or was this Friday night?
No, they were. Everyone I caught off that high bank swim was on the Friday night.
Right.
I did not get a bite on the overnight. In the end, it was a waste of time. Because they'd come in about 10, 11 o'clock.
Okay, so they're all morning bites.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, so it was pointless fishing the overnighters. Yeah.
Does that mean that you were more like, I don't know?
I pushed it. Yeah, I didn't fish in the week for a bit and just blagged as many weekends as I could.
Really, did full weekends?
Yeah, I didn't have kids then.
Did it throw a lot of the kind of tension and the emphasis onto it? Like you must have felt like you needed it bang on a Friday night. Like you needed to be perfect.
Yeah.
Because it was such a good chance of a bite.
Yeah, but you could redo them in the morning if you got 10.
Really?
Because they weren't coming in till 10, 11, so it didn't matter. As long as everything was perfect.
You could have rocked up in the morning then.
I could. I did for the end fish I had off it. Yeah, that was just the morning trip.
You just adapt your fishing as the fishing unfolds.
Yeah.
So Scar Common's ticked off. Biggest common in the no, third biggest common? No, there's probably more, wasn't there?
No, it was third biggest.
Third biggest, depending on whether there was more than one second common.
Oh yeah, that is true. Yeah, there could have been a few of those. Yeah.
Lovely fish though, and the spot is rocking. Are you squeezing 2 rods on there, Joe?
Yeah, 2 rods. Yeah. No, both fished on the gravel at this point. Both of them pretty much side by side.
Yeah,
baited out there. I think I used to spawn the peanuts out there to start with, and catapult the boilies. It was just within catapult.
Doable with the 22s.
Yeah, just with the big baits, used to be able to get them out there. And I'm sure the sort of last few trips I did on there, I didn't put the peanuts in when I was fishing. It was just boilie.
And is that something you do to this day? Like you start dropping the seed out?
Yeah. I try to. Yeah. In fact, I don't use much seed now. I really don't.
Well, obviously, we're coming to perhaps the reasons why boilie can be more of a particle approach for you now that you've got your own bait firm. Probably helps. But in terms of rounding off the Dorch campaign, what happened from that point on?
Right, so I've had that scarred common on that would have been Friday night. The next week, I had both nights of the weekend. And I remember I've set up on the high bank as you would, and I blanked the first night. Nothing come in, but down to my right hand side is a little bit we called the first corner. It's only like not even a 50-metre walk down to it, And that's where they've
mate
been known to be caught in autumns.
That's
before.
where the mate you put them on, online.
Yeah, exactly that. But I'd obviously fishing next to it, I wandered down there constantly, and there was nothing. The bottom was black. They just hadn't been in there. But I'd look like probably about 10 times every time I fished. But this one morning, I've gone down there and it was just glowing. At the back of this snag at the back, it was glowing, and there was a little fat black fish sat in there. I think it was one there was a fish in there called the stocky that's come from someone's pond. It wasn't an original, but actually grew quite well in the end before it died. But I saw that there, and I was like, I think I went back, got some bait, and threw a bit of bait in down there, and then kind of walked backwards and forwards all day, looking. And I wasn't going to move because obviously I've caught these fish. I've filled it in with bait, and you think it's coming. I remember going down there and it was blowing a big wind that day, massive southwesterly, but that was right on the back of it, so it was flat, calm water there. The rest of the lake was, for a little lake, it was quite windy that day. And I remember I'd gone back again and sat on that same patch of gravel. It was a big len. It was sat there, like the big end of the lake, and like I'd never seen that fish knowingly in the water. And I was always looking in everyone's photos. It looks really long, but in the water it was really short, and it was just sat there. And I was like, "That's it. I'm sure it is." And anyway, it was. I've looked at it, and I was like, "Fuck, right. I've got to move. I've got to move into this corner." Anyway, it's only not far away at all. But I started packing away, and by the time I got back, the whole stock was in there.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, I don't know how they get in there, because I kind of thought they had to come in from the front, and there's a little shallow bar, but you never see them come in through there. I think there's a fallen down tree, and they're somehow pushing their way right at the back and coming into this little
from the
corner.
gate sort of direction. Yeah, tight to the margin.
And I'll tell you what's quite weird, and this sounds quite mad, but there's a massive tree hanging over this corner, conker tree. And them fish got in there the day the conkers started dropping in.
Right.
Yeah. Whether they eat them or not, they might do.
Yeah.
I don't know. You wouldn't think so,
no.
But it just seemed like a hell of a coincidence to me.
So we're talking early autumn now.
Yeah, that was been the 3rd of October. It was.
Oh, so mid-autumn. Yeah. Big fish season.
Yeah. So anyway, I've moved down to this corner, and I was kind of watched as well as I could. And when they'd gone, I positioned 2 rods in there. I put one sort of over towards this snag on a little bit of gravel, and one I had on a choddy with like a 20mm sort of dark red fish meal bait. Probably looked like a conker. And I flicked that one down the edge, and it weren't long at all. It was probably like half an hour later. I'd set up sort of on this swim further along, dropped the brolly in there, like set up. Anyway, rod's just gone. And I've hooked it, and as I've run out and picked the rod up and kind of gone towards it where the overhanging trees a bit above me, I've got the line all knitted up in the trees above me. So like the rod was useless. There's a great big carp thrashing around on the end, so I just threw the rod behind me, ran forward, grabbed the line, and like hand lined it into the net.
No way.
Yeah. And it was turned out to be a fish like called big common, had a long common,
which at the time was almost a bit of a mythical carp. Was it barely been caught ever, had it?
The guy Glenn, caught it. He'd probably been caught before, but Glenn caught it for the first time in a long time. Like 38 pounds.
That's it, mate.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's 30 foot. How big was it?
37, something like 37.12 or something like that.
I mean, the head on it, mate.
Yeah.
You like a carp's head, a big carp head, don't you?
That's perfect carp. But it had come out since Glenn caught it.
Yes.
My mate Pete actually caught it twice. I'm not sure if it is that spring. I think it was actually. I actually wrote a chapter about this in a local book that a few guys did, and I think I got it wrong, because I'm sure he caught it the same spring and maybe a couple of springs before that.
But it was one of the least caught fish in the lake over the time.
Yeah. It wasn't a friendly one, no. But yeah, most of them didn't do any catch. Cuttail made up most of the catches. In fact, probably made up 70% of the catches.
It's the only one I caught. So one of 2. There you go.
Yeah.
That's. Hang on, is that the same?
Yeah.
Did you flip it round? Did you?
No, that's the same fish. Yeah.
No, in the sense that where you're taking the pictures from.
We did them so behind my head where those leaves are gathered up.
Into left
the
there.
other side, we're behind that.
And you're about to fall in, aren't you? In this,
one
of these,
I did fall in. Yeah. Yeah.
But a mega fish, like.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, we thought that fish was dead. In the spring, there was always rumours of another big common, and in the spring, I think Pete had caught it at like £37, and actually it come out a lot that year because another local guy, Paul Pryor, caught it. And then a few weeks later, Matty McAuliffe, he had a £38.14 common, and it looked very similar, but it was two-tone and bloated up. And because that fish had come out a few times when it didn't normally come out, I think we kind of all thought, oh, there's something wrong with it. And I think the one Matty had really struggled to go back. I remember Garth did the photos, didn't he? And he was saying it wouldn't, they had to hold it for hours to get it to swim away. And I think we kind of put two and two together and thought, oh, it's the same fish. It don't look very well. So then that summer, a big dead common turned up. It was. I mean, it's quite well gone, but it was a good fish. And we're like, which one is it? And it all added up that this one had swollen up, got caught a few times, obviously wasn't very well, then died. So anyway, that day I caught it, and it clearly wasn't dead. Like I was
looking in the peak of health.
I remember on the phone to Pete, and he was fishing down the river not far away, and I was like, I've got a great big common. Like, I don't know which one it is. We thought maybe it's this second common which hadn't been caught at that point.
Yeah.
Well, it actually had by Matty, but we didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it was alive and well.
And I think, as it turns out, the fish that Matty caught wasn't the one that died either, was it?
No, it didn't. Yeah, it happened a few times. The same story, yeah. Another time, this is fast forward, probably 6 years or so, when sort of Mitch and Tom and people like that were fishing it. I remember there was a great big common turned up dead. And I remember I packed away from where I was fishing. We all went down and we buried it on the back of this point. And I ain't joking, it was two-tone. We'd matched the scales up. We had camera phones at this point, so we matched all the scales up and everything. It was that second common, like 100%. Buried it. Next year, my mate Sean Prawley caught it. Like, it was just like, well, what? How is this even possible? Like, there must have been a few of them that were very similar. Like, yeah.
But you never caught the second common?
No, I never did, no.
Because it was kind of again, he's probably more elusive than the...
I probably would have stayed on for it, but we didn't even know it was actually even there or what was going on at this stage. But
so after the capture of the long common, which is just a phenomenal carp, I think you struggled to catch a better common, though you've caught a few nice ones. What was next?
I still had another night left that weekend, because this is on the Saturday. I had that Saturday afternoon. But, I mean, the bay I'd caught it from's tiny. Like, as soon as I'd caught that fish, they were gone. I ended up moving back to the high bank, and I remember that evening I got the rods out like just for dark, and a bit autumn, and like I said, it's turning into autumn, so a lot of the roach were gathering up in front of me. It was quite deep in front of the swim, and the pike come through, and one of the pike bit one of my lines off that were going out to this like nicely raked spot, baited spot out in the pond, and I've been bitten off, and I was like, fuck's sake. I thought, I need to get that rig back because that is going in the morning. One of them, and I didn't want it to be the one that's out there. And I spent all night with that casting weed rake, like casting out there, trying to get it. You think you'd ruin the swim because I was stood there like well into
flogging
dark. Never picked up anything. And bearing in mind, like I said, it had gone really quiet for weeks on the tench front using these 22 millers out there. So I was like, well, if it gets picked up,
it's a carp.
It's a carp. It ain't going to be a tench. Anyway, like 3 o'clock in the morning, running the rod. I caught a tench on the cracked off rig. It tangled around one of my other rigs, so I got it back.
Mental.
Yeah.
What? So there's definitely the fates have aligned here.
Yeah. So otherwise, I got that rig back. So and I think I left them in that first light. I put them both back out there. Bit more bait, and sure enough, 10, 11 o'clock, started sheeting up out there and over there. And
Did you get in liners, Joe, or was it at that range through the weed? Or
I can't remember, if I'm perfectly honest. I can remember watching the big patches of fizz coming up out there and stuff like
gassy old lake that as well, wasn't it?
It was. But anyway, I ended up catching another one at sort of 10, 11 o'clock that morning, and it was fish called the scattered lin,
which I came down to see.
That's the one where you come down with Sal. And I think we were all there. Ginge, Pedro come down, didn't they? Garth,
mega carp.
Yeah.
I mean,
you took those photos, didn't
you? I'm not sure if that one shows it at its absolute best, but it gives you, it gives you an idea. I mean, what's going on with its dorsal, Joe? I don't think I noticed that the first time. It's got like
it's kind of right away.
Abbreviated, yeah.
You've got a bit, then a gap, and
little
then maybe
perch,
another little
There's
bit.
almost nothing though, is there?
No, a lot of them had that. They had fin rot of some kind at some point.
But he was a sensational fish, like of a different era. You'd say.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
Always made
one
me
of the
think
best looking carp I've ever caught.
Yeah.
And probably always will be.
Yeah. What was that? Was he mid 20?
29, 12.
Oh, was as big as that?
Yeah.
Long fish.
Yeah.
You can sort of see how long it is, Joe. There.
Yeah. One of the last captures of it, I think.
Was it?
It got caught the next spring by someone, and then it died shortly after that. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, you can see it's fairly late in the morning that they
already.
already.
When I actually caught it, it was grey, over windy still.
Oh,
but
really?
I'm sure by the time like you guys
Everyone
come
turned
down,
up,
the pressure's gone up, the clouds parted.
I had time to sober up and come down.
Yeah.
But
that fish actually jumped out when I hooked it.
Did it?
Yeah. One of the only carp I've ever had that like boshed out when I hooked it, like a tarpon or something. Like,
no way.
Yeah.
Did you be able to ID it as it boshed?
No, I wasn't. No, I was just
It doesn't look like it could fight, Joe, but maybe it did.
No, a lot of them didn't. Like I said, I'd rake this channel out there, and if I hooked them, as soon as you lift that rod, they'd kite round behind the weed and make it difficult.
Yeah.
If I kind of just let them run to the back of the spot, and then
Tease
just
them back.
literally just put the rod tip down in this hole and just wind, and they just come straight back through it normally. And then when they're under the tip, you have a little bit of a battle.
At this point, is anyone else fishing the lake? Like, are you? You've got this spot absolutely rocking, presumably.
It was a lot quieter than it had been in the spring. Ginge was fishing.
Yeah.
There's a guy called Paul Pryor fishing.
Are they leaving you to it though? I think is the point.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. I can't remember if anyone else was, but them two definitely were. There was a few, but it was a lot quieter than it had been in the spring.
So what after this one?
After that, I carried on baiting. I blanked the next week. I think I did a weekend as well, and I blanked. So the following week, I weren't allowed to go fishing. I kind of maxed it out.
Right.
But I said to my missus, I'm going to fish the mornings.
Yeah.
And I think we went out for dinner and did whatever in the evenings. And I just went in the morning. I remember fishing the Saturday morning. I fished till like 11 o'clock, nothing. And I remember I put a lot of bait in actually when I packed away at Saturday lunchtime. And I'd kind of decided that morning that fishing on top of this gravel bar is a little bit blatant. It was done. And I actually clipped up the left-hand rod a bit shorter and kind of a bit to the left, and I was dropping in like the silt at the side of the bar. And I remember I changed that one as well from a bottom bait to a hinge with a sort of 20mm cork ball on it.
Big hook bait for that.
And I would have set up my rods while I was there. Now you would have all been clipped up perfect. And I remember we went out the Saturday night, and I overslept, and I didn't get there till 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It's a little bit late, but I still thought I had a few hours of bite time. And I propped these two rods out to the spot. Like, I don't think I even set anything up. Everything was out the back of the van there. And I remember boiling kettle before the kettle even went, whoosh, it was off.
Left-hander?
Yeah, the left-hander and the silt on the hinge, it was big len.
Right, the crowning glory.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to catch.
Did you, as you're playing it, do you know what it is?
No.
Until it pops over the net?
Yeah, until it come into the net. No, I didn't, no.
I mean...
Yeah, I remember Ginge was there that day, and he was on bummers. I'm sure he was on bummers. And he heard, obviously it's only, in reality, 40 yards away, and he heard me at the bite. Yeah. By the time he had legged it round...
It was in the net.
He was coming in the net, yeah.
I mean, just describe that fish, Joe.
Oh, it's absolutely stunning, isn't it, really? There's not many like that. I love the rest of its tail. Yeah. Like, it's almost like a fully scaled.
Yes.
Like
big, square plates sort of thing.
Yeah, had little pockets on the end of its pecs as well, which
I
never
turned
knew.
Back on themselves.
Yeah, they've gone back on themselves.
Yes.
So you could have put something in there for the next person that caught it. Like,
occasional little drop, like a reverse drop scale, whatever you call that, but just above the linear line. But one of the best fish that has ever lived in Oxford. In most, I think you'd struggle to argue that point, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean it was 36.15.
So it's been bigger. Than that. Yeah,
it did
before
40,
you caught it.
It did £40 in the end.
In the end, but it's been bigger than
before it died.
Yeah.
I think the year before it done 39.
Yeah.
But I mean that's big enough.
Who cares?
It's big enough for me. I'd like, if it had been £10 bigger, it would have been a completely different lake, wouldn't it? Imagine that, £46. How many people would be sat around there?
Well, it was
a £35 club ticket.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be getting a swim, would you?
No.
They'd have,
And you've actually had one of the best spells of angling it's possible to have, surely.
Yeah.
Now you did go back for the other big linear in the end, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that wasn't until 2011. I think I fished the following weekend after I caught that.
Did
you? Yeah, I remember doing a Friday night, and then the weekend after that, me, you, and Garth, didn't we? Somehow brought stone egg. Did you buy one?
No, I didn't in the end.
No,
but you two did.
Yeah, we thought it'd be a good idea to buy
winter's
stone
tickets.
Winter's tickets.
Yeah.
And went over there and blanked for the whole winter instead. should have just carried on.
Yeah. So I think we should move fairly rapidly on from Dorch, but we do obviously want to talk about Cuttail.
Yeah.
Because it's we're telling the story. It may as well finish the way it finished, and that is in the shape of the other big one, which. At various times they were both the biggest fish in the lake.
Yes,
they?
They were. There was another one. To be honest, it's probably the friendliest one in there. It's probably, I don't know, I dare say it probably did 50% of the captures for the whole lake.
Yeah.
But I never caught it. And it was 2011. I'd started fishing another sort of big lake down Reading Way, and I struggled. I blanked really, really hard. And I think in the end, I just fancied, it was close to home. The big pit I was fishing had algaed up. And I kind of just thought, I'll tell you what, I've got a couple of weeks here. I might go back and have a go for that Cuttail, because I kind of figured out where he'd get caught by this point. That run of fish I'd had was from out in open water. Cuttail generally got caught around the edges. A lot of the time. I can't think of many captures from sort of out in that middle area. Ginge, my mate, used to catch it. I'm sure he had it about 5 times. It might not have been, but he used to catch it from the crate swim. Every year he fished it, sort of down this edge. So I started baiting there. Had a little go. I didn't do many nights. I remember I did a weekend. And the lake had changed actually, because I'm sure that year they had put in sort of 15 or so small commons, which weren't there before. It was just sort of these 11 original fish. I remember I caught one of those straight away. I'm not sure, I've got a photo on the map, but I'm sure it's £11 or something like that. And by this stage I was baiting this I decided the right hand side of the margins, it was nice, it was deeper going down, you could see the gravel going down. And I just loaded it with bait for a couple of weeks. I'm sure I was using it at the time. It was the first time I used buckwheat.
Yeah,
I remember that was in there.
Yeah,
a lot of tigers, not many boilie at all at this point. A lot of hemp, and I just baited it for a couple of weeks, and I think I did a couple of nights fishing there, and I baited it. And I remember this one week, 'cause it was on my way to and from work, so I could almost stop every day. In fact, I did. I'd stop on the way to work and the way home from work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'll have a 10-minute look, and then you get home at 6:30, and the missus like, "Where have you been?"
Stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Oh, traffic was really bad.
Worked overtime.
Yeah.
So I'd look all the time, and around the back, I used to park instead of parking in the actual car park. I used to park on the road and just hop through. And I remember there's a swim called the Willow, and it's kind of like high bank there. I remember coming through and just looking across, and you could see this spot, it had been it was glowing, going down.
Yeah.
You couldn't miss it. As soon as you walked through, you're like, fucking hell, they've been on that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I did a night, maybe a night, and blanked. And the next, I ended up doing a morning. At this point, I was doing a lot of morning trips as well, because I was only allowed to go fishing 2 nights a week. I say allowed by my missus.
Yeah.
So I'd do a morning as well.
Yeah.
Because that
Just
didn't count.
your fishing time.
That didn't count. She doesn't care if I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go fishing. She's not even up till 7:30.
Yeah.
But it'd give me another chance of catching a fish. And to be honest, I drove all the way to Reading to do mornings and stuff like that. I used to do it. But anyway, I'd gone down for the morning. And I remember I was put one rod down this edge. It would probably be about 6:30, 7. It went. And
this is Stokesy tells the same story, doesn't he? Because I think is he on the reef?
He didn't even know I was there.
Right.
He was on the reef behind me, and I've just turned up for this morning before work. And I think the first thing he knew about is when I was shouting an hour or two later. Yeah.
And that was Cuttail.
Yeah, it's Cuttail. Yeah.
£38 or something.
No, it
37?
wasn't. It was £35.9. Yeah, it's the smallest it'd probably ever been caught in that period. Yeah. I'm not sure why. I remember on one side of the mouth it was a bit red.
Yeah.
And I did wonder whether it had been tethered or something.
Some tackle, yeah.
Or maybe it just spawned particularly well that year. I'm not sure, but yeah.
You could sort of see on the tail there, Joe, where it gets its name from, and it did heal pretty well, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, I think a guy flapped off his unhooking mat and broke off.
Some kind of an old boy or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then it actually healed up, and then a couple of years later, the same thing happened. I think it might have just slapped its tail on someone's mat, and the old bit
flew off.
Yeah,
but
the
then healed up again.
Yeah.
I think by the time I caught that fish, it was almost like a rounded.
Yeah, it was
in my photos, didn't you?
I did.
So, yeah. So I mean, incredible times, and again, the sort of lake that now we just don't have.
No, it's not. No.
But you mentioned that you'd disappeared off to Reading. You'd sort of left the orbit of the Oxford Lakes, hadn't you, at this point?
Yeah, I had. Yeah.
And this is like, it feels like the Wild West, Joe. Like one of the real lesser known big Reading pits, and always felt to me at the time when we talked about it that it was super hard. Like I'd never seen you struggle like this.
No. I remember. Yeah, I managed to get. It was a small syndicate was formed on what had previously been a no fishing kind of. A few guys had poached it, but it had never been fished sort of properly. Didn't even know what was in there, apart from the fact it had done a £48 common the year before, and there had been a handful of fish. That was the big common was one of them, but there had been a handful of fish put in there maybe 7 years before. 8 years from some lakes down the road. No idea who moved them, but someone did. Yeah, and then sort of like this unknown stock. There were stories like, I remember Dale saying, in like 1989 I saw this massive fish down by like these pipes and stuff, but no one had really ever caught anything from there. My mate Piers had fished it on and off for years, and I think maybe, I can't remember, maybe like 5-6 years prior to him getting a syndicate on there, he had fished it for the whole summer, blanked, and then had 4 bites in the morning off this heavily baited spot. But the rest of the time I think he lost one and landed 3 of them. One of them was this big common at like £35, and the other 2 were also fish that had been moved at the same time. And then he'd never caught anything since. A couple of guys that we knew had fished it the year before, and Tony ended up catching that same big common Piers had caught. I think it was £47, maybe. So that was
immediately you're thinking these are catchable ones, these little group.
Yeah, that one had been caught. And I think they had a couple of other these fish they'd come from another lake. But again, it's that same group. These other ones that got seen over the years still hadn't ever been caught. I think they'd done actually really well that year, and they might. I can't remember now, but they definitely caught more than most people would. But anyway, next year Piers has actually got the fishing on there, and it is an official syndicate now.
It's a fair way to go for you, Reading, isn't it? Like you're not someone that you don't love the travelling side.
No,
especially with the way that you like to fish.
In fairness, it actually wasn't that bad. It was probably a 45-minute drive, like really. But it's not bad at all.
You mentioned obviously that Piers had been baiting and had caught them, but is there a danger with that approach and the way that you like to do it as well? Is there a danger with that kind of approach where you pick a spot and you bait and you bait and you bait that you can end up wasting a lot of time?
Yeah, you can if you get it wrong.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
So how do you make sure you're getting it right, Joe? Because you were going down there. I remember you were going down there and floating around the lake at 4 a.m. before work.
Yeah. I'd looked a lot. Yeah, looked loads. I used to have that any hot day I had at work, I'd have it off, or I'd be sick, or I'd make sure if it was 20 degrees in the spring, sunny, I would make sure I was at that lake. That's when you found them. Like, I mean, all that sort of perfect weather, like overcast, low pressure, big winds. Sit down there, I wouldn't see a bloody thing. I was so out of my depth as well.
Really?
Yeah, it is a great. I'd never done anything like that.
It's
before.
big, isn't it? What are we talking size? Is it 80?
It seems big. I'm not sure whether it is. I'm sure it's 79 acres. Yeah, I might be wrong. But yeah, I mean, it was hard. really, really hard. And I remember, I'm sure it's the first trip I did. It would have been sort of April time that first year. I gone and fished, and there's a couple of local lads I met. I met them at a work party we did when the syndicate first started. Psycho and Billy, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's really hard down here and everything." I was like, "Yeah, be all right. I'll have a couple." And when I said couple, they started laughing at me. No, pissing themselves.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, "What do you mean? Like, I'll fucking have a couple, you know? It can't be that hard." Like, I caught fish everywhere I'd been, so I kind of was like quite confident. But yeah, I didn't catch a couple that first year. No, I blanked hard. I caught a tench.
Why did you blank?
It's just ridiculous. Honestly, it was the hardest lake I've ever fished and ever will fish. It was, like I said, it was big. It algaed up, which didn't help. The water was always coloured. You'd have a few weeks in the spring and that was it. And I probably didn't know what I was doing. I'd fish these smaller lakes and stuff like that, but these were big natural fish, and like I think they weren't there a lot of the time, and it was so low stock as well. I'm sure the first year I fished it, I had a list on either a bit of paper or my phone that I'd wrote down, and I had 16 fish on there that I'd seen, or sort of
that you knew were in there.
The people 100%. I trusted I had seen,
yes.
Or someone had caught it maybe 5 years ago. But yeah, they didn't eat bait either. They really, really didn't appear to.
So straight away you've had the legs taken from under you, because what you like to do isn't going to work.
It didn't work, no.
Right.
I lost one the first year.
Yeah.
October, I remember it was blowing a big northeasterly wind into a swim called Caterpillar Point, and I'd not long had the rods out, and it went, and it just kited round, and I remember being out in the water trying to give it side strain around this point, and the hook just popped out.
Not when you've worked for it like that.
No.
Not good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few other lakes there that I'd sort of nip in, or I'd stalk them out of there. So I was keeping myself busy. I didn't just sit in my tent for 12 months blanking. And I went back to Dorchester, but I gave it a really good go.
Yeah. What were you seeing, Joe?
It's quite a funny stock of fish. I can't remember exactly what I saw. So there was these few. There was one called the half linear, which I think had been caught in the past at £37. I saw that. I saw the big common. There was a ghosty I used to see a lot. There was an old one which Mickey Gray had named Brucie Bonus. So this fish was one that had got put in there, but it had been put in there from a different lake, and it was it's rumoured to be a leany fish.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Yeah,
go on.
So that's would have been stocked in 1950. I've actually got a picture of Kenny Hodder with that same fish in the 80s. Yeah. So it was definitely a real old one. There was that. At this point, I think people thought it was probably sort of 38 to 40 pound. That one.
Yeah.
There's obviously the big common, which had done 47 the year before. There was a long common, which I think had been seen and guesstimated to be maybe 37 pound. I think Dan the year before had caught a 19 pound scaly one. There's a few sort of original, like, you know what I mean, looked like red mire commons, like just typical like common. But
so just a rogues gallery of a few carp.
Yeah, and they had seen also there'd been a really big fish seen the year before. A giant. They're saying 50 pounder, and I think they described it as the big bold one or something like that. There was that, and I also that first year I used to see Mirror, which had a lot of scales like tight on its shoulder. Maybe it weren't very big, maybe 25 pound, but a very, very low stock. I'm sure there might have been two ghosties actually, two different ones. There's a long skinny white one and a short orange one.
I've got two questions about this. One is that you're driving from Oxford to just to be at the lake at first light and then going to work, which is, you know, you're not even fishing, like you're just taking a flask, aren't you?
Yeah, sometimes I'd go and fish and couldn't find anything, or there'd be bait on my bait spot, and they're just sleeping down there on the bed chair.
Really?
Not even putting the rods out. Just so you can get up in the morning and see.
Did any of that morning prep lead anywhere?
No. No, never. It was like there weren't a carp in there at times.
And this is the case for the rest of the syndicate too?
Yeah. I'm trying to think what I got caught. Mickey Gray caught one straight away that year. There was a fully scaled as well, and another scaly one. Mickey Gray caught the small fully scaled that first spring, like straight away. I can't remember if anyone else. And a guy called, I've forgotten his name, maybe Steve. He had a ticket. He was quite experienced big pit angler, fished son in all those lakes back in the day. He caught the big common. I think it might have even been like his first trip or something. He definitely didn't put as much time in as everyone else.
Yeah.
He turned up, he caught it out of the edge. I think it was £46 in the summer. Apart from that, I don't think anyone caught anything all year.
How did you break the lake's hold on the fish? Because at some point you started catching them.
I did the second year. I didn't catch the first year. The second year, it would have been probably sort of April. It was early April, really early, but we'd had a hot spell of weather, and sort of there's a bay at the bottom called Cottage Bay. Used to be able to kind of fish from that bank. You can't now. But at the time, I would have found them by boat, because I used to boat round the lake, like looking, and then when I found them, I kind of bring the boat in somewhere and sort of look from the bank, because obviously when they see you in the boat, they spook.
Yep.
So they're gone. Well, most of them do anyway. I'd found like sort of this little bit where I'd get a rod in, and anyway, I'd watch them two fish come over. There's a fish called the half limb one I mentioned, and the big common. They kind of come through that edge and then disappeared further down. So I put some bait down there. I think it was like a bit of corn, a couple of broken boilies, maybe a handful of hemp, a couple of tiger nuts. And they come back out, didn't even look at it. Come back, didn't even look at it.
Right. And these are the catch, the
these are the two catchable ones. Yeah. Those two probably come out more than anything else, and they wouldn't even look at it. Anyway, I don't think they ate the bait in the end, and in the end I think I had to like sort of sweep it off the spot with my foot and like just make sure I had somewhere to fish if I saw them there again.
That's just entirely depressing, Joe. And I mean, how are you keeping mentally in the game?
I don't know, it just felt like I had to keep going. I didn't want to fail. It would have been easy just to go, actually I don't fancy this.
And Billy and Psycho would have been right.
Yeah. But I wasn't going to give in. But it was depressing. A lot of the time you go and bait you'd have these baited spots, and I'm driving down there after work to fish. You're kind of parking up, and the other thing to mention is the lake's like a sort of water sports lake, and you're not allowed out in a boat. Well, they're out in a boat, so you have to wait for them to go in. So you'd often have to wait till 8 o'clock in the evening to even go out to where you were fishing and set up. You get out there, you can't see your spot, you've got no marker, the water's pea green, you kind of prod around, oh, there it is, bloop, bloop.
Oils and...
boilies.
Oh, boilies.
Yeah, bait just pop up off the spot.
Oh.
And you're like...
So do you think too much natural food, getting the spots wrong, like what?
Probably everything.
Yeah.
It was incredibly rich lake.
Talk to us about the swim feeder.
Yeah, the lake also had some absolutely giant tench in there. I mean, I saw a tench the first year that you would have said was an 18-pound carp.
Right.
It was that big, like it was massive. No one ever caught it.
Yeah.
But they were very good average size, a lot of these tench, doubles. Pete Cranston used to fish for them, and like he kind of inspired me to have a little go. I thought, well, I'm wasting my time down here anyway. I might as well try and catch like a double figure tench. I raked this little hump off in close once, and I ended up fishing. I like sort of read what Martin Bowler was doing, and he was using the maggot feeders like taped up with like a sort of little balanced maggot hook bait on. I thought, yeah, I'll use that. Anyway, I've raked this spot up, and I've put a bit of bait out there, plopped the maggot feeders out there. Obviously didn't catch anything, never going to catch anything, but wound in the next morning, and there was more food in the swim feeder than when I'd put it out. It was full of shrimp.
There's a picture of that, Tobe. I might have to guide you in a bit, but there's a picture of the swim feeder just full of. Which one's it in, Joe? Is it in the one with
the first one? I think.
So summer 16, is it?
No.
Up that one.
Yeah. and then sort of across. Down.
There you go, down the bottom of there. There we go. Pop that one up, Tobes. So there's just a pile of hog louse, I think now.
Are they? Oh,
yeah. A similar sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the look of that, you did catch tench from there, Joe.
I did catch. I caught one tench the first year, which was £11.10.
Yeah.
I call that carp fishing.
Yeah.
But it's the only fish I landed all year. I did catch quite a lot later on in the line. I had a really successful autumn for them once. I had 19 tench.
Fishing for them?
No,
Right,
just
right.
fishing the carp stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, I only actually tried to catch them a few times. That was unsuccessful. And I did have an 11-pounder sort of again a few years later.
So when you were able to, I think we've missed a couple of bits here. One is that you've seen the big one at some stage, this mythical big carp.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I saw it quite a lot over the years, but yeah. I mean, it's hard to gauge weights on them, but it's the biggest fish I'd seen. I hadn't fished for 50-pounders or anything, but it was a very big carp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saw Brucie as well. I remember the first time I saw it, everyone had seen it before me. Mickey, but everyone was, have you seen it, Brucie? I was like, no, I hadn't. And it was would have been the first year, and it was later on than everyone else. They'd all seen it in the spring, and it must have been like June or something like that. And there's kind of a bit called the reserve, which kind of led off from the main lake. And I remember drifting in there in the boat one day, and it just come towards me. This great big, like pale-looking fish swam towards me, and it was only like sort of 2 foot on the entrance to this bay, and it just ghosted underneath the boat and just flanked on its side underneath me, like almost looking up at me, smiling.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird, like, and I was like, oh my god, that's Brucie. It does look big. It's good fish. Anyway, he kind of went off that way. And I think I'd gone into the reserve, had a look round, nothing in there. And I come back out, Brucie's there again. And this is so weird. Like, this fish used to follow you around in the boat.
Right.
I'll come out, and bearing in mind, this is, like I said, I think it's 79 acres, so there's a lot of space around the edge. Followed me around for like hours.
Right.
I went down, and it was there. And then it vanished. And then you're like, it's gone. You're getting like another 100 yards. That fucking thing, it's back again. And he'd swim underneath the boat.
Genuinely looking for you.
Yeah. Later on down the line, found out he was blind.
Yeah.
So maybe he couldn't see you and he didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was weird. It was very strange.
I remember around the time, because this was all around the time that Mickey's book came out, and I feel like there was a picture of like single scale from Ashmead, or was it Mickey, maybe, or Terry had taken a picture, I forget.
Yeah.
And I remember you likening the big one to that sort of same class of carp, like just the proportions of it and the way it looked in the water.
Yeah. It is a big carp, kind of a classic sort of almost like Mary-shaped carp, not overly long, just a beautiful carp. It had a big scale on its side. I see it. That the real big one in there didn't like the boat at all. Every time I saw it was gone.
Yeah.
And it's funny because some of them, like, you'd think there was only a handful of carp in there, but then you'd see the same characters again and again. But then you just get these random days, like maybe twice a year or something, where it's like, what's that one? What's that one? And you'd see all these other carp. But yeah, I mean, it had a great big scale on its side. I actually saw it with Brucie once. They come beside me. And bearing in mind at the time, people were saying Brucie was £40. I thought the other one was a good £15 bigger, like, which would have made it a mid-50 if we were correct on weights. But these fish hadn't been caught. Brucie hadn't been caught for certainly 7 years before I had a ticket. It didn't get caught for a long, long time after that as well. The other one had potentially never been caught.
Do you think, I mean, I think about this a fair bit, because there are waters still with big carp that don't seem to get caught, and it feels a bit like, to me, if they're not getting caught, then they're never going to get caught. Like, you're not going to catch them on bait.
Yeah,
probably
not.
You're presenting this fish as a historical fact, Joe, aren't you? This big mirror.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah,
it's still never been caught.
No.
To this
It's
day.
still been seen by people in the last couple of years, apparently. So I mean, I haven't seen it, but I trust them because I've seen it myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And are you remotely romantic about these sort of things? Is there any way you could have been wrong about it?
Yeah, of course there is. Yeah, we're always wrong, aren't we? Until you catch it, we don't know. We'll never know. But I kind of trust my judgment enough to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was probably the fish, really, that kept you on that lake for a long time. Bear in mind, it's the hardest lake you've ever fished.
Yeah, Brucie as well.
Yeah.
Brucie was the one. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was. Just because of its history.
Right.
I wanted the other one as well. Of course I did. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to go and shake it off. But no.
This is a Brucie, a leany fish that, the like of which were dwindling at best.
Yeah.
I feel like we were moving towards your first capture there with the bit where you were cleaning off the spots. So was it long after that you finally broke the deadlock?
Yeah, it would have been a couple of weeks after that. We had one of those sort of funny years where you get like an extra bank holiday. I think it was Jubilee or something like that anyway. Probably completely wrong. But anyway, I had 9 days off work for a few days holiday. Anyway, weather was really good. It was hot. Like, it's exactly what you want on a lake like that in the spring. And I found a few fish in one of the bays called the Reserve. I ended up spending a few nights fishing in there, and I had 3 bites that trip. Those few nights I had 3 bites. The first one was a 5-pounder. The second one was a 9-pounder.
Yeah.
And the third one was actually a better fish, but I lost it. It took me down some trees down the left-hand side, and I ended up having a hook pull. So I kind of forgot to mention that the year previous, the guy who runs the lake had put in maybe 10 or so small carp.
Yeah.
I think the biggest one was probably 12-pound or something. So yeah, they weren't quite sort of what I went for, but I'd actually caught fish and had a bite, so I was quite happy with that. I mean, a 5-pounder to most people, they wouldn't even.
I bet they're big now, aren't they? Those fish.
I caught one of them right at the end of my time on there. One of them I caught 3 times.
Right.
The 9-pounder I had like almost every year for a while till it died. The other one I caught years later. I think it's 24-pound. Looked absolutely amazing though by that point. Yeah.
I feel like did you catch the big common quite early?
Yeah. So it would have been, I think it was like sort of my third night in fishing this little bay. And the weather changed. I can't remember what it must have been blowing sort of like a westerly, southwesterly. So it would have been coming into sort of the entrance of this reserve area. And where I'd seen those 2 fish down the bottom of this bay, obviously I was continually looking there, and I remember the night before, I knew the wind was going to turn to this northwesterly, which would go straight down the bottom there. Mm-hmm. So
that's back to Cottage Bay, yeah?
The bottom of Cottage Bay. So it would have probably been like the sort of third night fishing this bay. I've gone down there, and I remember I baited it with, wouldn't have been a lot of bait, probably like a pint of hemp and a pint of caster on this sort of gravel spot that I'd sweep the bait off the week before. And I'd fished, went back and I fished that night. I think I lost that one that night, so it would have been the third night. And I remember it would have been like lunchtime. The wind by now is blowing down there. And I'd gone down to have a look, and you could just see it grown. That bait had gone already. Like, as quick as that, they were down there on that wind, probably there before it even turned. I was like, right, I've got to go and fish. Like, I can't stay in this bay. Which is crazy, really, because I'd actually just caught fish for the first time, but it looked better out there. Yeah. So I remember I packed away, I've gone down there, boated into the corner, and again, dragged everything up on the bank and kind of walked along and set up down there. The wind was pumping. This is like, it must have been about 12 o'clock, lunchtime. And I ended up putting 2 rods down on that shelf. I remember I put a little tiny balanced tiger on top of this hempen caster, put another handful of it around it, and I put a little small 12mm white squid popper, like just kind of not far away, just down the shelf. But I kind of just thought, well, if they don't eat my bait, they might just have one mouthful, and that might be enough. And set the rods up. I was setting up further down the bank, and I think a guy that was fishing on one of the other lakes, Churchill, like drove past, and he was like, "What are you doing here?" I'm sure he gave me a beer or something. He used to love a beer. And like this sort of lunchtime, it's kind of all overgrown, so can't really see the lake from where I was unless I stood by the rods, which were pretty much where my rigs were. So just sat back in the sun, had this beer, and I'm sure it weren't more than an hour later, it just went. Just one noted, it's just gone. And it didn't fight overly hard, that big comment, but I remember it just went out and out and out and out and out and out. Probably took a lot of line, but then just sort of kited around and just wallowed in the waves. Yeah, just netted it. And initially I kind of looked in the net. I'm sure I phoned Piers and was like, it's not that big. Just thinking it was like maybe a 29 pounder or something like that. And I think when I went to break the net down and roll it up, I was like, oh shit, it's actually quite big.
Now you went on to catch this fish twice.
I did, yeah.
Which is the first capture? Can we show? And how big was it, Joe?
It was 47 pound. Yeah, that's it.
That one here.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 pictures from this capture. So mint, mate, isn't it? That, look at it.
Yeah.
Incredibly fat.
Yeah, it was a big, gutty fish. Yeah. But it's 47 pound.
I finished it. There's a great shot of front on, and you can see just the size of the mouth. That's a wicked shot.
There should be the shot with a lake going down behind as well. I like that one. But like I said, that fish had only been caught. It come out. That would have been its 4th capture out of that lake. So
really,
yeah.
I mean,
you can see not a mark in its mouth.
That absolutely mint, thick. I mean, it's a PB. I think at the time it must have been.
It would have been. Yeah. I mean, that's 2011, so 12 years ago now. But at the time, there weren't actually that many big commons in the country. You had the Butterfield and probably a few others. Now there's probably a 47 pound common in most sort of like
big fish lakes.
Yeah, big fish lakes. But back then there wasn't. That was a really big common. Yeah.
That I love the scale in this last shot, Tobes. The returner, like
the one with the lake.
Just love seeing a big lake disappearing off into the distance in a catch shot. It's biggest pit you've ever fished.
Yeah.
Oh, having said that, you touched on the Leany Lake. Must have been bigger than that.
Yeah, actually was. Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time there. But
I did photograph a nice 32 pounder for you there.
You did. Yeah,
look at it, lovely proportions. It looks entirely different colour there, Joe. The fish.
Does it? Yeah.
It look less vivid.
Yeah.
But you sort of see Reading away in the distance. I think there, or something like that. Tilehurst or something. Yeah. Yeah, mega, mate. I mean, you've got to be buzzing with that for you.
I was. Yeah. I felt like I could catch them now.
Really?
That was turning on. Yeah, because it blew down there, and they didn't come back. The wind turned easterly, and I remember I was on the phone to Garth, and I was like, I saw one show, and I was like, catching them, and I was kind of moving round, like, I don't know, I just felt like I would.
But you weren't then going to spend fortunes on caster and stuff, were you, or did you feel like you had to?
To be honest, a lot of the sort of the good hits of bait fish I had out of there, I did use caster.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't. You were early on the caster. Like this was 10 years early, Joe. I think.
I was well ahead of Terry. No, it was Pete Cranston.
Was it?
Yeah. He said they're the carp like caster in there.
Really?
I'd never really used them before, like apart from sort of float fishing when I was a kid. It's Pete Cranston that said, so that's why I started using them. Yeah.
And did you get into some of these rarer ones, Joe?
I did, in years to come. I didn't catch many. Like I said, I was gunning for it.
Yeah.
But they would have been my last bites that year.
First and last almost?
Yeah. It all happened in a week. So I've had those 3 fish and then nothing.
A bit like you described with Piers.
It was all or nothing. And it wasn't until the following spring, 2012, that I caught again. Again, I'd probably been there way too early, probably been there since February or something stupid like that. And really, you probably didn't need to turn up till mid-April.
At the earliest?
Depending on the weather. I actually saw them a lot in March, randomly.
Really?
Early on, I'd seen them quite a few times in the same area, not doing a lot, but it was almost like our first trip I'd see them. Never caught them, but so they're obviously up and about earlier than you think.
Surely the whole big pit thing normally is if you can find them, you can catch them.
Yeah, no, this was different. I don't know, maybe it wasn't, because at times they did seem catchable. And like I'm about to just go into now, like spring 2012, It would have been May, but we had a lot of rain that year, loads of rain, and there's a pipe that comes in, and that pipe was gushing in, and I remember like there's kind of a bush behind it. You couldn't really get there, but I managed to squeeze into this bush. And I've gone in there one day, just next to this pipe gushing in, and there's like the whole stock was there. Right, yeah. In this little bay, they were underneath this bush, a lot of carp. But the swim that fishes the pipe corner, the water hits the banking close, and I tried to set up in there, I couldn't.
Keep your lines.
You can't keep a rig in the water because there's weed gushing through the pipe coming in. It is like, you know, floodwater fishing on the like.
Yeah.
So you're like dee, 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 and all the rods are gone within 10 minutes. You couldn't hold. So I had to fish from the other side in this sort of copse of tree. It weren't a swim. It was awful to fish. But like I squeezed in there, and then I could fish the sort of slack side of this water. And the first morning in there, I ended up catching one, which was the very first. Remember I said I had a 9-pounder and I caught it a few times. Yeah, it was that one. And I was like, right, I need to come back. So I come back. Probably was the next night. No, me. I've probably gone home and said I need to go back, and I ended up catching one of the fully scaled. The same one Mickey had caught maybe the year before, or the year before that. Caught that one. I think it was 18-pound. And I come back again on the Friday, and I left work early, probably finished at lunchtime or something. And anyway, I got back, and anyway, within a couple of hours, I had another one, which turned out to be one we called the Red Mile Common. 28-pound maybe. Got a
photo of. We got the fully and the Red Mile Common.
Yeah, they're both on there. Yeah. So that's the common and that's the fully. Yeah.
Okay.
What one do we want?
Pop up the fully first. That's the 18-pounder. Is that one still about, Joe? Do you know?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure.
Lovely old. It doesn't look like it's going to ever be a big one with the size of that tail on it and the little stubby head.
I'm sure I caught it again maybe 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I know the common hadn't been caught since I'd caught it there in Fort Gone, but it's been caught this year by someone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Go on, let's have a look at the common Tobes. I mean, these are rare. These are as rare a carp as you can find, aren't they? Hardly ever been caught in their lives.
No, I mean they're not big fish, but it doesn't matter to me at all. Like
absolutely bristling, that one, isn't it? Look, his little barbs are sticking out, and you know,
small mouths.
Right.
Those original commons in there had really small mouths. I noticed.
And what did you catch? Were you still on the natural baits at that point?
No, these were on boilie.
Right. So very different.
Yeah. Pop-ups, MC nut, bait, and pop-ups, and just scattering a boilie. And again, you're like, oh my God, they eat boilie, because they hadn't done before.
Yeah.
I couldn't, but I think it's just right place, right time. I think you get such small windows on those types of lakes, where they probably just throw caution to the wind, and whether you've got a maggot out there, a boilie, a tiger nut, it's just them little windows when they're there in numbers, they're hungry, you catch them, and then they kind of all disperse, vanish. You're back to square one again. But they were on boilie, yeah.
So you'd started, was this when you had Oxford Carp Baits as a sideline? Or had you started full time at this point?
No, it would have been sideline. Second year this would have been.
Really?
But yeah. I'd started
before we move on with the fishing on this lake, tell me about the inspiration for starting the bait firm.
Well, at the time, to be honest, I use a lot of bait myself, so I wanted sort of cheaper bait for myself, and I thought about making it and everything. And also, me and my wife were looking to have children at this point, and it was kind of like an extra income. I wasn't on a great deal of money, and I thought if I can make a bit of money, subsidise bait for myself, sell a bit to friends, that would do. That's all it initially was to start with. And then obviously things progress, and it kind of took off from there.
And the moment you decided to quit, though, Joe, that's a huge step.
Yeah, that was a few years later. That would have been 2015.
But let's do that. Let's just talk a little bit about Oxford Carp Baits now, though, and then we can crack on with that story, because it seems like a good point to at least to tackle the things around it and the gamble that it was. I mean, your wife works, so perhaps you could have survived on one income. But was there a moment when you thought this is a bit hairy?
No, not really. No, I didn't. No, I just went for it.
Yeah.
I was in it. I was earning more money doing that than I was working.
So the sideline had started to become, the side hustle had become like as big an income as the job.
Yeah.
And at that point, you were like, I can make this work.
Yeah, I can. And I remember, it was a year after Molly was born, and my wife got offered a job working for the NHS on sort of like contracting, so she was on quite good money, but only had to work a couple of days a week. So if I left working for Drennan, I could have the kids those couple of days, and she could make as much money as she could in a week's work. So it kind of worked out quite well. I'd get a couple of days to go fishing, she would do her work, I'd have the kids. It worked quite nicely for a couple of years.
And how did things progress? Like, because obviously at some point you wake up and you're like, this is a real business now, and you know, I need to be serious about this.
Yeah, no, it always has been. I've always been quite serious about it. But it sort of got to the stage where obviously I think prices have gone up so much on bait in sort of the past 12 years I've been doing it. And at the time I was paying for my bait to be rolled for me. Which kind of eats a lot of the profit. And I didn't have a job. Well, I was doing that, and obviously I was rolling hook baits maybe a day or two a week, sorting out the media stuff, dispatching the orders, but I still had quite a lot of free time, which initially I spent going fishing. But then obviously realising I could earn more money if I did it all myself, I decided to completely change the business and just roll everything myself and almost start the business, not from scratch again, but...
And these were your own, all of a sudden these were your own recipes, or like your own take on stuff?
Yeah. Well, initially, like I said, Jeff Bowers was rolling bait for me, and the sort of first year or so I brought the base mixes off him, and then kind of developed a couple of my own to go with it, and eventually I've sort of gone full cycle, and now everything is my own, like,
and is that
produced in-house, so...
proud of that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Do you find it easier to sort of like to sell a bait that you know the inside out now? It's your thing.
Yeah. I've got so many customers all over the country and speaking to people. It's brilliant.
But I know the effort you have to put in. We were talking about it on the way up, Joe. You know, you're working nights at times to make sure orders are fulfilled, aren't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I say.
But it fits around your fishing. I understand that. You know, you're doing it because you can then fish.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But because for a lot of people, jobs in the industry kill their fishing, but it hasn't done for you.
No, it hasn't. No. It's busy. It's really busy, but you also get downtime. Like I get a lot of time to fish through the winter now, which is brilliant, isn't it? You want to sit down the lake when it's like -5, but you just got to. I don't mind, but. And then you get drops off. Like it's been quite quiet the last couple of weeks. Fish are spawned everywhere. It's a bit hot. People haven't bothered to get out. I've got out and done a bit of fishing myself. But through the busy periods, it is really busy.
I mean, I've seen you, rolling bait back in your previous little sort of garage unit, if you like. Now you're now a proper full fat, bait rolling unit. But for a period, there must have been a time when you were busy, but you were having to physically table roll a lot of bait in a small space.
I don't know how I did it. Like, obviously I worked from my garage for just doing that for the first couple of years, and I still get mates come around now and they pick up a bit of bait and stuff, and we stand in my garage and you kind of look at it and think, how? You
couldn't swing a cat in there,
No. I mean, I don't know how big my unit I've got in Stanton Hardcourt is now, but it's full a lot of the time. When I get big deliveries of ingredients and stuff, it seems like there's not any space in there. So it's like, how on earth did I do it in a little tiny garage? It was a nightmare. So there's sacks of ingredients, and it's like, I need to get that, but it's underneath all of that. You'd have to move all that, put it there. Then it's like, fuck's sake, now I need to get there. So you'd have to move it all back again.
So logistics wise, there was lots to learn.
Yeah, it was very hard work, but we got there in the end. So.
And I think we touched on it earlier, this idea that now boilie is a bit more like your particle. You're happy to introduce it as if it were particle. Now listen, you get your bait cheap. Effectively it's cheap, but you're still having to roll it, Joe.
Yeah,
and you're still having to throw your own hard work.
It still costs money.
Yeah, absolutely.
It still costs quite a lot of money.
There's no such thing as free bait, is there? As such, not to you anyway.
No, I do use a lot of boilie, a lot more than most people do. I bait in buckets.
So you've skipped that whole seed stage, like where you start a spot off with it?
Yeah, I do sometimes use seed. I have been last few weeks, but I don't a lot. No, not anymore.
Or you're quicker to bring in the bigger particles, i.e. the boilies.
Yeah.
And is that because of the way that fish feed over that, or is that just an ethical? Like, why do you do it? Why go to boilies quicker nowadays?
Because I think they're better than hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of. I love tiger nuts. I use a lot of tiger nuts.
Mixed in with your boilie.
Well, say a typical baiter would be a bucket of boilie and like a sort of small 2.5 litre bucket of tiger nuts.
Right.
The thing with the tigers is they're versatile hook baits, aren't they? I fish a few lakes with crays in, tench. They're anti-tench, anti-crayfish. They stay on, and the carp love them. Yeah. So I'll often use tigers with the boilie,
But there's never a question mark in your mind that we spoke earlier, and you said before we rolled, that it might take you an hour to roll your own bait.
Yeah,
that is an eighth of a normal working day that is spent producing the bait that you want to use to fish the way that you want to fish.
Yeah.
You don't ever question the kind of
no. A lot of the time I've got bait. We're doing mixes. Normally I do 13 kilo mix at a time. We do, I don't know, up to 10 of them a day or so. But so there's always bits left over. There'd be like a few kilos of this. But sometimes you don't want those 12 millers that are left, and it's like, fuck's sake. Oh God. And then you have to start again, roll yourself a few bags of bait just to go and bait up. But
do you do anything different? Like
no.
And how do you decide what bait of your range that you're going to use on a given water or whatever? Do you have to make that call time of year?
It depends. In the springtime, I will use my MC nut bait. I find that so effective in March, April, sort of till May. I mean, it does work it all year round. I've done well on it in summer and stuff, but I do find the fish meals are better come once that water temperature's warm.
So you'll definitely make that switch.
Yeah.
Usually.
I've used all of them, and I normally end up using the newest one because
it's on you to test it. Let's face it.
Someone has to use them. At the moment, I'm playing around with something different at the moment, which I've been using really well this year. But I mean, it's still a couple of years of coming out. I like to use everything myself for a year or so.
And then do you feed it into the likes of Stokesy?
Yeah, and then sort of people like Tom will have it. Anyone I know really.
And you'll genuinely take feedback with you, Joe, on that? If they're like, oh, it's too hard, it's too soft.
Yeah,
it will be the interplay of those ingredients that make it that way.
I don't have field testers. I get so many every day. It's constant. Can be a field tester? I want to be a team member. I don't do that. Like. If people use my bait, I ask them for feedback or I say this, but I don't advertise for just any person to have.
No, I suppose you've got Tom, and you're getting quality feedback, and obviously from people you trust.
Yeah. A lot of it's sight as well. I don't do sort of tank tests or anything like that.
So you want to fish with it?
I want to watch fish come in and feed on bait. Yeah.
And do you think you can detect, let's say, an increased appetite for one bait over another bait as such, in the way that they...
Depends where you are, to be honest. Sometimes they're quite, I don't know, a bit greedy, aren't they? And they eat anything. Other times they're not, but you can notice things, yeah.
So we've got Oxford Carp Baits it's on the boil while you're fishing the big lake. Does that mean that now that you've had a bite on the boilie, that you're going to start feeding that into your approach more widely? Yeah,
I did. I started using the boilie on there. I had those 3 fish in, so it would have been May from where we were talking about, by the Red Mile Common and by the pipe. But that water soon dwindled out. As soon as that rainwater stopped coming through that pipe, they just went like they always do. They were gone. In fact, I looked underneath that bush every year I fished it and never saw another carp ever there again. But that was sort of that few days they were there. Yeah. Amazing. So also demoralising, the fact they've disappeared off into 80 acres of vastness and you've got no idea where they've gone. Yeah, the problem was as well, that water was, at that point, was only clear for a very small amount of time, because you come on there after the winter and you kind of have a murky tinge to it. It's clear, and then when you get them hot days in April, I don't know what it does to the water, but it suddenly go crystal clear. So you're going out in the boat like, oh, there's carp, there's spots.
Yeah.
But very quickly, as that water warms up, and before even they spawned, it was pea green. You couldn't see anything. Like, yeah. So
would you pull off when it got at its worst?
I'd try, but I did go other places. Yeah. Yeah. I just found it so demoralising. Like I said, going out and prodding these spots and bait would pop up, and I never even felt that confident with a prodding stick. It's like, oh, it's gravel, but weed grows up. I think a lot of the time you're going through that, and it's not actually that presentable down there, where you're thinking, oh, that's a nice gravel bar. You put a rig down there, donk, lift it up, donk. And next morning you wind it and it's smothered in silkweed or something, and you just. So I'd like, in the end, I had like little rakes and things that I'd screw onto the end of the pole so I could kind of go along the bottom and whip it up just to see what it was. But I'm sure someone very good at boat angling would have done a much better job than I did. But I did my best.
Yeah. And significant captures wise, because we obviously want to move into the Brucie story, because that's like the defining story for that lake, really, isn't it, for you?
Yes, yeah.
But the mega common that you caught, presumably before Brucie, was that that long fish?
Yeah, that was 2014.
Yeah.
So 2012, I actually pulled off and went to another lake through the summer, but I went back in the autumn. I ended up catching the big common again.
Well, I've got a shot at that time, second capture, I think. Was that bigger that time?
No, it was 43. So,
okay, so it spawned out.
Yeah. I had a little tiny fully scaled again, stockfish, like £5 or something, I think it was. And then I had a run of.
Is that the fish that you said Jerry Hammond's recently had?
Yes, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
£38 or whatever.
Yeah,
£39.
Advertising a different podcast, wasn't it? The other week, I see. Yeah.
So that's the second capture of the big common. Looks lovely.
Yeah.
Great head on it, Joe, isn't it?
I'll tell you, that night I caught that. It was September 2012, and we actually had 2 full moons in September. So we had the blue moon, the second one, and I was fishing on a point called Wankers, obviously named after.
Very apt.
Yeah, the flashing man had cycled down all the way down, possibly. But I remember sat on that point that evening, and I'd seen a bit of activity the week before, and I'd put a bucket of bait and boilie out there. Not a lot, like a kilo of boilie and a bucket of bait. And I've gone back, so it would have been a Friday night, this blue moon. And I remember there's a guy fishing opposite me called Crop, and I remember him phoning me up saying he'd just lost one. And as I put the phone down to him, this moon come up. And it was as it was rising. My rod's gone. We were 100 yards apart, but the same area in LA. My rod's gone. And it turned out to be the big common again. I wasn't sure at the time, because obviously there's a few mysteries and stuff in there.
And also a little bit smaller.
Yeah. I weighed it, and so I sacked it up anyway. And I think an hour or so later, I had that little fully scaled off the other rod, and I wasn't clipped up.
Right.
Like, I think there's a pole out in the lake, but for some reason
there it is, look.
I hadn't immediately put the rods back out, because I was like, I've caught 2, like, there's no rush. And I remember just sat there through the night. Anyway, about 4 o'clock in the morning, it was quite calm, flat calm, and the fish has jumped out there. And it was the motorway, because it's next to the motorway, but the motorway had stopped at this point, like very little traffic at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. And the fish is like, blood dosh. It was huge, whatever it was. But the big one was in the sack, like down there.
Yeah.
So
who knows?
Yeah,
how close you were.
Yeah. But anyway, the next day they went. Those cars,
standard. Yeah,
I'm sure they just vanished. And I seen it was a good spot, because I caught 19 tench and a bream off it over the next few weeks. Yeah, which is sort of like more than I'd ever caught before. In fact, I started repeating on the tench at the end of it. So I was catching the same ones again,
Yeah. So by that stage, the spot is done.
Yeah. I think, I had one more late on in October, maybe early November. I had a 20-pound stocky, and that was kind of it for the year.
Talk to me about this big common, the other big common, the long common, such an impressive carp.
So I didn't fish late 2013 because my daughter was born. I fished local, and I went back 2014. And first I had a few that year, but I ended up fishing a swim called the Pipe Corner.
Same one,
yeah, opposite where I'd caught him the year before. And there's a bar kind of in the middle of that bay, and I'd sort of been baiting it every now and again. So I used to park my van there, so I'd pass over it. So I'd always chuck a bit of bait there. I only did the odd night there when I couldn't get where I wanted to go. And I remember I'd seen a good fish off a bay further down, and I'd fished there the previous couple of trips, but on the way back I'd baited this spot again. I'd gone back out to this spot, and I remember all the bait was still on this spot further down the lake, and I was like, fuck's sake, you haven't got long. It's not as if I can look around for hours. No. You have to get the rods out. I thought, wind was blowing a southerly now, which is kind of blowing into where I'd been putting this bait, where I parked my van. I thought, I'm going to fish there. I was just going to fish there. So I floated back down. I got down to this swim, the pipe swim, and been baiting this bar. And I'm sure I saw a carp. I can remember, it was a big one. And I remember going over it, and it kind of stuck its head in the weed. Yeah. Like, as if I can see, it was like trying to hide, but its great big fat ass was hanging out the back of it. Like, so it weren't doing a very good job.
No.
And I was like, bloody hell, like they're here. So I've gone and fished this swim. I set up, and I remember I put 3 rods lined up along this bar. One was on a solid bag of casters for some reason. I've never used a solid bag, probably never have done since, with a tiger nut on it. The other one was on a D-rig, so that was over the main bit of bait, and this solid bag was lowered further along, just on a little clear patch at the side. And I put a white pop-up, maybe another rod length the other way. So anyway, I sat there that night. I think I had a few liners in the evening. I'm not sure what time it would have been. Probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. The white pop-up rod's gone. I played it in, and it was a scaly one, which weirdly enough I had never seen, but I saw it the week before, and I remember I phoned Piers up, and when I'd seen it, and was like, I've just seen a really scaly one, like fat belly on it. I reckon it's £29. I didn't say £30, it was £29. Yeah, and that was the first one I had.
And that's it there?
Yeah, it was £29, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
He's kind of he's a newish looking fish, that one.
Yeah, that's the one that had been caught the year before the syndicate at £19. Okay. So it's obviously grown well.
They do well in that lake, don't they?
Could have come from anywhere, someone chucked it in from their pond or...
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, we're not sure.
Yep, okay, so that one's...
So the first rod went, and then maybe an hour later the middle rod went.
The D-rig, yeah.
Yeah, the D-rig, and that was one called the veiny fish, which had been caught but hadn't been caught for a long time, and that was £38.
There's a picture, is there?
38.12, yeah.
Really clean carp. Yeah. Entirely different to probably anything else that we've seen, you
can see all the veins on its stomach and stuff, so that's obviously why it's called that. And maybe half an hour later, the final rod was away. And it turned out to be a fish that we kind of called the long common, I think. It's a fish that had been seen for years and years and years and years, going well back to whenever anyone first looked round it, but never knowingly caught. Might have been at some point, but certainly we didn't know it had. Ended up catching that one.
And that was on the... That's the one,
yeah.
That was on the bag of casters, the solid bag of casters.
Yeah, there's a tiger nut hook bait on it, but
Look at it, mate.
Yeah.
I mean... You've had some nice commons, Joe.
Yeah, that's one of my favourites. Yeah.
That round tail, thick looking tail.
Yeah, it did have a fat wrist on it. You can kind of see it, like
fat wrist, but also thick. The fin looks thick.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember.
It's an amazing night. Just like it. Just when you just feel like you're up all night, and all of them, they just go. They literally strip like 80 yards of line off you, and then they kind of just wallow back along the surface. But all 3 rods went in a line. Like they come down that bar, and it was like boom, boom, boom.
And that was 38, was it?
No, sorry, that was 33.10, I
33,
think.
Sorry,
yeah.
Just incredible.
So, yeah. I don't think that one's ever been caught since.
Really?
Yeah. I remember a couple of years later, I think someone found a a common dead. It might be, it might not. We'll never know. But yeah, certainly never showed up.
No, I mean that's what that lake is, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
just a succession of fish that have
they vanish.
either not been caught or like not for years.
It's the same. Normally, the same couple of fish that get caught by the guys that are willing to sit there, and the rest.
I mean, the big common's long gone now, isn't it?
Yeah, it did. That died probably 4 or 5 years ago now. 4 years ago or so. Yeah.
Take us into the Brucie thing, because obviously this is the pinnacle of your campaign, really.
Yeah.
You've all been seeing it.
Yeah.
It's
so,
potentially a near 40-pound leanie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Potentially bigger. It was getting bigger. Supposedly getting bigger. So this was 2014. Again, I had my boy George that December. So I didn't fish down there the following year, and people have fished it that year. And Mickey and Piers, I think Mickey had done a bit that summer, and they'd seen Brucie quite often in this bay. It was bigger than we thought. It was now like, I think it was mentioned it might be £50, certainly £45, and I'm sure someone said it could be £50, like this great big leanie that hadn't been caught for 14 odd years. I went back in 2016. I had a bit of time this year. I'd sort of, I say 2 nights, but sort of 1 day in between them, so I had full 24, 36 hours, whatever you want to call it, down the lake. But it was hard. It was probably when I felt like I was on it then, really, really on it. I kind of knew where to look. I was willing to look, but I didn't see fuck all. Like I suddenly had 2 nights in the week where I could fit. Normally at the weekends the boats were out. You'd be wound in at 8 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. But suddenly I had this time. I couldn't find a carp. I was sat out in the boat floating around at like 3:30 in the morning as it's getting light, just hoping to see something. I didn't. I don't know what happened that year. I don't know where they went, but it was hard, really hard. I'll tell you what it was. It would have got to about mid-May, it would have been, and I'd seen a couple in the reserve the week before, and I think I tried to set some traps, and it failed. And I'd watched. I don't watch many fishing videos, but I watched Alan Blair, and he was like freelining maggots at them, wasn't he? Yeah. And I remember me and my mate Dan, I said, "Oh, you watched that? He's got getting in." We were like, "Get on the maggots." I thought, "I'll tell you what, I'm taking some maggots." I didn't freeline them, but I took some maggots, thought they might work. So next week I had this. Would have been the sort of second morning I was there. And I've gone and set up in this reserve with my maggots out in these spots, waiting for these carp to come back. It got till like 12 o'clock and nothing had come in. I was just like, fuck's sake. I thought, all right, I've got a couple of hours, and I'll go and have a look around. At least I might see something. So I've gone in the boat, and I've ended up going down the bottom of Cottage Bay again. And there's kind of like a sewage sluice that used to come in. I don't know what it did, but it used to pump a bit of water out. But it was horrible. It was like black, like lots of like floating bits. It's probably shit and stuff coming out, but I never really saw them there. But I saw them round it, but not actually sort of grubbing round there. Yeah. Anyway, I come back and I kind of made a little hole in the bank at this point with some nails in one of the trees so I could get in there. And as I come in the boat, I see 2 fish come along the edge. I was like, fucking hell. So I pulled in round the corner again, walked down to this little hole. I thought, I'll flip the rods out. So I put 1 rod out, a little bag of maggots. It's on a KD rig for some reason. I just thought it was really easy to tie when I was sort of stalking. Yeah. I didn't need a kettle or anything. And I remember I flicked it down and I actually put the rod down there. And I got up the tree. When I got up the tree, a couple of fish come through. I couldn't see what they were, but you could see it. And I got down from the tree and I probably sat there and rolled a fag or something. And the rod's away. It just went. And it went out and out and out and out, and it waded me up, and I had to get the boat. I remember going out there, rode myself out there, wound myself out above the fish, and it come out of the weed. Bloody, it's Brucie. It's Brucie. I remember playing it, it's like crashing round, netted him from the boat, got him in. Bloody hell, gone back to the bank. I phoned Piers, I was like, I got it. I've bloody got it. He's like, is it big? I was like, kind of looked at it for the first time. I hadn't even and I was like, Yeah, I don't. Yeah, probably. Like, yeah, it's not that big. Anyway, he's like, I'll be down in like half an hour. So I sacked it up, and anyway, like, when he's turned up, we got it out. Yeah, it was bloody £27.
I remember hearing about this at the time. It was like the biggest joke anyone's ever played.
I was 100% the same fish.
Yes,
I'd seen it, and I'd seen the red, like, where its vessels are burst on its side. I'd seen that when it come
Look
past.
how old it is, mate.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best £27 carp I've ever caught. But
blind in both eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the colour. I mean, for those listening, it's tough to describe. Ancient looking fish, very, very washed out, yellowy.
Yeah.
With a big red blotchy veins on the side.
It always looked pale in the water, to be honest. I
mean, it looks like a dead carp there, Joe, almost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But what do you think happened then? Because you're experienced anglers, you've seen this fish, you think it's probably £40.
I don't know. I don't think it was ever huge.
Yeah,
it can't have been. But a couple of the other ones, there's a couple of fish in Butterfield, wasn't there? Double belly, was it?
Yeah.
I'm sure at its peak that got to sort of £38.
Yeah.
So quite a big fish. And I remember the next year it came out at 26.
Right, similar sort of thing.
Came on its way out. So it was it's obviously kind of grown, and then they go, don't they, backwards. So it might have been a bit bigger at one point. Who knows? We'll never know. But it seemed very weird that we were all so wrong. And like I said, fish like that, £29, I got the weight spot on. I've seen it with fish, and I went back after this. I carried on for a few years. I actually caught it again a couple of years later, and it's even smaller. I think it might not have even been 25 or 25 something. But it's weird because I used to see it with a ghostie, one of them ghosties, all the time. And the ghostie was £25. I caught it, and Brucie used to be massive compared to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last times I went, the ghostie looked bigger than Brucie.
So it was as simple as he was on his way. He was a withered old man at that stage.
Whether it was ever quite as big as we thought it was, it probably wasn't. I spoke to a few guys fish for those old leany fish in that area, and they said they did look quite big in the water. They had big frames, big heads, big fins. So, yeah.
Where does it rank for you, Joe?
Definitely one of the best carp I've ever caught. Yeah, definitely the best £27 ever.
Top 10 of fish you've caught some incredible carp, many of which we're not able to talk about. So we're sort of picking our way through what we can.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah.
But it's up there.
Yeah. I fished for it. When I catch it 2016, so I fished for it that would have been my 7th year fishing for that fish. I hadn't been caught for 14 years. So, right, yeah.
Do you expect to fish a harder lake in your life?
I hope not. No. Oh, yeah, I'd go straight back.
Would you?
Yeah, I'd love to.
There's a lot more fishing there now, I think, aren't there?
Yeah, there is. More went in every year, and in the end, to be honest, it probably got harder and harder to catch those ones. But now those fish are equally as big and probably equally as special.
Mega place. You did stay in Reading though around that sort of time. You switched your sights to Butterfield at one stage, didn't you?
I had a little go. That was summer 2012. Was not long at all. It was on the Cemex ticket at the time, so it was. I think it was only like £60 for a 2-rod ticket.
Unbelievable value. Yeah.
And obviously, I knew it was getting sold. They put a whole portfolio of waters up for sale. So I thought I'll have a go. So I'm driving down there anyway, so I might as well have a go. Big pit, bigger than the one I'd been fishing, but a lot more fish, a lot friendlier fish as well. I had to go there through the summer.
I remember, were you fishing Hodders or something, or Barnets?
I did catch most of them off Hodders Point.
It was a tough gig just to get to the swim, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was horrible. It was quite a long walk.
Load and unload the barrow over there
was a fallen tree, they had to unload the barrow over, but you had to kind of come around the back of the dog leg and the mosquitoes, they were horrendous. You're literally wrapped up in your hands holding the barrows things. You look down and you'd have like 10 of them on your knuckle, on each hand, biting your knuckles as you pushed your way through.
But I always remember from that period the shots looking very atmospheric, Joe. The sort of, I think occasionally I saw a cat shot or looked like Butterfield in the autumn is, very nice, isn't it? It's sort of like misty and
yeah. No, I mean this is summer I fished it, so they were. I think it was July. I didn't do a lot. I kind of went there. I did a couple of nights here, there, and everywhere. And one morning I saw him showing big time off this point called Hodders, and had to go out there, and I baited it, fished it, baited it, and I think I had 11 in. I don't know, I'd like to say it probably weren't much more than 6 weeks. In fact, it was probably like 3 weeks of catching fish and a couple of weeks hanging on, hoping they'd come back. But yeah, quite simple fishing.
And the Cottage Lane Mirror was like the pick of the crop.
Yeah, that was probably the best one I caught. I caught another quite big one. They'd sort of done 40s in the past. I think it's called Measles.
Yeah, we've got pictures of both those topes. We've got. I remember.
But again, these are massive fish now. Like a few of them, I had like 30-pound, 20-pounders.
Yeah,
they're the giants now. Like
that. This fish is Measles, right?
Yes, that one is. Yeah.
And is that still there? Do you know?
I don't think so.
No.
I'm sure.
It's long, isn't it, Joe? That one.
Yeah, I remember one of the guys, Stu, telling me that someone had, maybe Oz or someone fishing it around that period, had it big, like that spring or a couple of springs before. In fact, I think it was Stu himself who had that one.
Yeah.
And the other big one I had was one called the Cottage Lane Mirror.
Yeah.
Which again, I think Oz and those guys caught it at 40-pound at times. Like, not sure if that one's there now or not.
No, old fish it looked, didn't it?
Yeah, that was completely different.
Pop that one up topes because
that gain had been moved from another lake at some point.
The Cottage Lane lakes are right behind it, aren't they? That area especially. I mean, so who knows how old that was, but yeah, I mean, it's a fairly unique carp, that, isn't it? Looking at it, look at this. You don't see fish like that very regularly.
Yeah.
Big smattering of scales, funny old tail.
Yeah, cool carp that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Mid-30s?
Yeah, it was 35 something, I think.
Yeah. One of the characters of the lake. I mean, I don't know if he's still there or not, but it was definitely...
These are all summertime fish, so they were all sort of down. But
did you enjoy your time on there? You saw the common, didn't you?
Yeah, I did see the common, yeah. No, I liked it. It's a really cool lake. They changed, didn't it? The next year it went syndicate, and I got offered a ticket the first year, and I didn't take it because I wanted to fish further down the road. Never got offered a ticket after that.
Right.
I was on the waiting list. I paid my money, and I've never been offered one since. Like,
right, maybe you're still on there.
Yeah, probably. I've got my 50 quid anyway. So
yeah. Yeah, well, if you're out, if Joe's ticket's out there, maybe it'll come up sometime.
But I haven't got the time now.
No. What was it like to see the common in the water?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it's huge.
Dog leg sort of area?
Yeah, it was. It was in that bit. They had all seen them at the bottom of the dog leg. I didn't know this at the time, but obviously subsequent years, I've got friends and stuff that have fished it. But I thought I was going to catch on a bit of bread flake.
Really?
Off the top, yeah. Probably was a million miles away, but come and had a good look at it.
Did it?
Yeah.
The Butterfield Common looked at your bread. I didn't know that.
He was sat his head in like a weed, and there was it moved. So I flicked a bit of bread out there into the hole, and it kind of went round this little bay. And it come back, and it went in a different hole. Like I was like, And I sat there, and about half an hour later, it moved. It went to the other hole, kind of like nudged it with its nose, and then it's like it knew. And his behaviour completely changed from being chilled out, and it's like rampaging around the weed, and it's all like duckweed in there. It was like sending up sheets of bubbles as it was like angry going round. It come past close in and got a good look at it. It's a big fish. I don't think they'd spawned yet at this point. I think they spawned really late that year, but
exciting moments that to see.
Yeah, massively. Yeah,
when it finally approached back into the original hole.
I was probably like,
and then it got the prick.
I've got a video of it on my phone.
Oh really?
Yeah. I mean, they were crap phones back there. You can hardly see it, but it was it's there somewhere. Yeah.
I think it's important to say, like at this point, that we could go on and on. I don't think we're going to have time to talk about necessarily like you're fishing in the Cotswolds, on large lake, for instance. But I really wanted to talk about perhaps as a final little campaign, the idea of this one fish in a lake thing. It's not a big one. We should make that point from the start, but it's entirely unique, Joe. A fish close to home. How did you even discover that there was one carp in a lake?
Well, I didn't discover it myself. Didn't even know the lake was there. It was actually a guy I met at Lynch Hill. Did a winter on Stoneacres. I've done a couple of winters on Stoneacres, but I met a guy and he told me, he was local as well, and he said about a lake, a little tiny lake that had 2 carp and a golden orph in it. But he had caught one of these carp at 30-something pound and the other one was 20 pound. He never caught it. I thought, and he sort of told me where it is. So I started going over and having a look, and I looked at it from very early that year, and I started seeing this fish in probably March, April time.
Lake's small, Joe, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of like almost like a guitar shape. It's an estate lake.
Yeah.
So the stream flows in at the narrow end and the big end's the dam end. I started looking around and I'd just see one carp. It looked a good fish. So I just kind of presumed it was this 30 pounder this guy had caught 10 years ago or whatever it was. I can't remember. But yeah, it was, it's the day after I caught Brucie.
Yeah.
I went down there and I'd been baiting, like one side was quite barren, the other side was all snaggy. On the snaggy side, I'd been baiting with sweet corn, it was.
Just to see whether it was going?
Yeah. That's all you need. And if they don't see a lot of bait, sometimes they will eat just stuff like that. And again, I had my, I've gone down there, anyway, I got this fish feeding in the edge on this corn. Ended up setting up a rod, got it sorted, and I'd used this KD rig the day before to catch Brucie, yeah. Never really used it before, but this was my new little stalking rig. Quick to tie, curved shank hook, bit of braid. Anyway, after 10 minutes, I hooked it and lost it.
Oh, I remember this. I remember it happening. Yeah.
Never used a KD rig since. But anyway, fast forward. So I've carried on the spring down there, and later on in the year, I started going over the Cotswolds. And this lake was conveniently on the road that I had to drive to get to the Cotswolds. So I was stopping, baiting, looking all this time, and I was baiting 2 spots around the lake at this point. So I've done a lap, and for some reason I thought I'm just going to do another lap. So I've gone back round. By the time I got back to the other side, this fish is feeding like I was like, bloody hell, it's there. Right, I'm fishing. So I've walked all the way back. It's quite a long way away from where I parked. I parked a few miles away. It was well hidden. I went and got a rod. Anyway, after an hour or so, I caught it out the edge.
What to describe the lead up to the you've lowered? Did you lower the rig in?
Yeah. I probably flicked a bit of bait or waited. I remember actually it went off. It's only shallow, just could see. And the lake was weird because it's full of silkweed, absolutely like luminous green and silkweed at the bottom. Yeah. So this big carp stood out like a sore thumb. Everywhere he went, you'd just see him against the weed.
But and at this stage, did you know that he was the only one in there?
Yeah, because I'd looked, and the other one had obviously gone. There was just this one carp in there swimming around. Like I said, you could see him. It was only probably 2-3 acres, not even that. Small lake, and he stood out like a sore thumb.
So he's come back in.
He's come back in, yeah. I can't remember. I'm sure it was on a little boilie. Yeah, maybe an MC note with a bit of plastic corn or something like that, and a bit of corn and crumb.
And when you hooked him, Joe, was it one of these like fish that's barely ever caught that just surrenders and straight in the net?
No, he went out. He weeded me up. I remember I had to wade out and like kind of get him out and netted him. But but this fish, like, bearing in mind I'd never seen it. I don't know if it's ever been caught, or I haven't got a clue, but when I netted it, absolutely blew me away. It was like, one fish in a lake, and it was absolutely like outstanding. Like, again, one of those top 5 fish I'll probably ever catch in terms of looks.
To pop a picture up, Tobes, that's the One Fish Lake one, smattered with
it's incredible,
with starburst, isn't it?
Yeah.
So back onto the summer 16, is it that one?
Yeah, that's it.
One carp lake, him.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry.
I mean,
yeah, it was better than that on the bank.
Yes, he looks like he's losing a bit of colour. Like,
he did.
Yeah,
he was like, when I remember I sacked him up, and a couple of my mates come down, Mitch and Dan.
Yeah,
and I was like, mate, you're not going to believe this carp. And we unzipped him. We were all like, oh. But it's like when I picked it up, they do it sometimes, don't they? They must be a bit stressed or something. The colour just fades out of them.
You can see it there,
But yeah, honestly, he was so good. Untrue.
That's it's one of the best carp you'll see, isn't it? And the fact that just sort of grew in that lake, totally unmolested, never seen by anglers, never mind.
I spoke to the guy that put me onto the lake afterwards. I thought I'd best tell him. He told me about it, and it wasn't the one he'd caught.
Right.
So obviously the old one that he'd caught big had died, and that was obviously the smaller one that had grown on.
And this was a 30-pounder, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mega fish. So it sort of always reminded me a little bit of that cluster of scales, like of the mother, sort of like the huge tail.
I know exactly what you mean.
But that's a prettier carp. The mother wasn't ever what you call a pretty carp, was it? But that was a mega one. And I think did both of those lads go on to catch it?
Dan, my mate Dan caught it. Same year, possibly later on.
But that just shows you how inspired he was, though, in a way, to go and straight on there. Yeah,
and then it vanished. It just went. I told a couple, never told it really anyone, but a couple of lads I sort of told. They went and looked, and it's never seen again.
No, I've been over there and looked as well.
Have you? Yeah. No.
Saw nothing.
Yeah, no, I don't think there was crayfish in there.
Was there?
Yeah, there was lots of little crayfish, and they were not the big signals, they were the actual
white claws.
Yeah, the original English crayfish, yeah.
Mad place. I mean,
and sticklebacks. And that was about all that was in there apart from him.
Yeah. What a fish. I mean, now I know mega as that one is, we can't not include what happened shortly after that, or the next, did you say next day?
It's the next day,
and this is another carp that not many people will have seen, Joe.
No, it's quite an off the sort of beaten track one. I'd heard about it quite a few years before, and we'd looked around, never seen a carp, but we had a quick look. It was a nice lake.
Totally different part of the country. This is south of, quite a way. 25 minutes south probably of where you were fishing for that one.
Maybe a bit further, another game, small lake, low stock of carp, and a customer of mine and friend, Matty, had caught a 40-pound mirror out of there, maybe the year before, or a couple of years before. And subsequently, a few people started fishing for it. Another guy I know, Dan, caught it and stuff. And I'd actually been going over there. I remember, and having a look around, and I started putting a bit of bait in a few places. And I'd seen a fish from a tree. It was quite big, and I thought it must be it. And it was coming in the edge and feeding, and it disappeared off. I weren't convinced it was £40, but it was. There wasn't anything else in there it could have been. So I went down with my daughter, and I'm sure it was the day before I caught that one.
Yeah.
And we gone down there, and she baited up for me. She was throwing it. Yeah. And you can imagine the Hempshire landing short, the boilies going a bit further. Yeah. But we got it out there anyway. So my mates come down and taken photos of me, and I was telling them that I'd seen this fish the day before coming in, and it'd been feeding, and we'd baited and everything. They're like, you need to go there. And I was like, I was going to the Cotswolds, and they're like, no, go down there, you've got to catch that. Anyway, I got there, and by the time I got there was actually a guy set up, not where I'd baited, but maybe 2 swims along. Yeah. It's kind of quite tight down there, so I didn't even fish. It was dark. I ended up just pulling out the bed chair, had a kip for the night. And in the morning, it was a hot day. I actually spent the day I saw most of the stock that day, and I was trying to catch them off the top. Got the odd one taken, but I didn't catch a fish. Kind of gave up it in the evening. So it would have been 6 o'clock in the evening. This guy had long packed away in the morning to go to work. So I've gone round and fished where I baited. Thought I'd just fish one rod down the edge, where I'd seen this fish. I set up, it was World Cup or something on, so I was listening to that on the radio, and just got my rod, and where I'd sort of clipped up where I'd planned to bait, I couldn't get a drop. It's and then it kind of dawned on me that Molly, my daughter, had thrown all this hemp short, so I kind of come back a little bit, donk. That'll do. Put the rod down, sat there, kind of been out there. It wouldn't have been half an hour. It's gone. It was the big one. Yeah.
You must have felt like Terry Earn on a roll like that, Joe, like just bouncing from one thing to another. Because you've been catching them out the Cotswold Lake as well.
I had. I had a 39-pounder out there the week before that as well. Like, it was it was incredible. But like,
real rich vein of form. Pop up that shot, Tobes, of this one. Let's have a little look because it's well worth it. Again,
this one here.
Yeah, that's it, mate.
Again, Mitch and Dan, the same. My two mates had done the photos for me the night before. Both drove all the way down. Did the photos for me again? Yeah.
Mega fish. Yeah. Again, fairly unique. That sort of the incredibly sloping head's really distinctive, Joe, isn't it? And the
scarred up, real old fish.
And the pit's gnarly, isn't it? It's a lovely little like crumbling old pit.
Again, like it is a club water, but unkept, if you know what I mean. Like,
I mean, that fish is no longer with us either, is it? Unfortunately,
no. Again,
I mean, the otters are pretty active in that area, aren't they?
Yeah.
But he was certainly such an impressive carp.
Yeah.
I mean, you've even got the same hat and coat on hat and hoodie on as the day.
Yeah, would have done.
Yeah.
To be honest, I wore them every trip I went for a while. I was quite lucky. So,
but you thought you were carpy, did you? And notice that. Well, this is almost the perfect example, Joe, of the sort of fishing that you'd love to do, and certainly the last two stories I think captures what you're about as an angler. So thank you so much, mate, for coming in and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, you're welcome, mate.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.